Chapter 4305. Mo Lien quickly grabbed his wife and stopped her from pouncing forward to slit the ghost-face hall master's neck. Although the little fellow was quite strong, she was obviously not Gong Songfeng's match. To deal with a cunning and intelligent person like Gong Songfeng, it was naturally better to let idle people like Mi Yen and Heichin deal with him. As a matter of fact, the entire devastating island was on the verge of collapse from the terrifying and concentrated explosions. The streets were crisscrossed with deep ravines. Heichin and Mi Yen had already taken advantage of the chaos to rush to Gong Songfeng's side and attacked him without saying a word. It was already difficult for Gong Songfeng to deal with the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal alone, not to mention that Mi Yen was also joining in the fun. Hall Master Gong could only retreat step by step. While he was in dire straits, two figures flashed to Gong Songfeng's side. Fan Meng's cold and solemn face was expressionless. She raised the flying knife in her hand that was as thin as a cicada's wing and blocked Holy Sun Mi Yan's attack. Then, she leaped forward with Fan Yu and naturally received Holy Sun Mi Yan's attack. Then came the sound of galloping iron hooves. At the entrance of the street, a large number of human-headed lion beasts suddenly appeared. They deformed and dragged the body of a male lion, but their heads were strangely planted on the body like pumpkins. They did not have necks and looked weird as a whole. Arbor had already seen this thing when he was looking at the sculptures in the underground village. It was the same as the harpies he saw in the Phoenix Forest. They were all invented by Tian Yun, the product of the deformed and improved medicine. "What's the ranking of that cultured corpse puppet?" Arbor suddenly asked. Hall Master Gong, who was concentrating on dealing with the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, was stunned. He could not help but turn to look at Arbor. "What?" Lord Jojo's face was full of impatience. She flew out dozens of attack talismans and threw them directly at Gong Songfeng. "It's the corpse puppet that can play the zither." If Gong Songfeng wanted to dodge her attack talismans, he would definitely give the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal a heavy blow. Therefore, he could only turn around and deal with the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, allowing the attack talismans to land on his body. A burst of refreshing explosions made him recall the scene in the Red River Canyon that day. On a rainy day, the little girl had thrown him a mother-child chain explosion and a guiding lightning talisman. At that time, he had been electrocuted. It had been a sour pleasure. Compared to the dozens of talismans today, the little girl had been merciful today. "What's the ranking of the cultured corpse puppets?" "He's not your subordinate?" Arbor persisted. Today, when they attacked Devastating Island, they did not see the cultured corpse puppet. It was clear that it did not follow Hall Master Gong here. "That's 16 from heaven, right?" "Flying to heaven." The little stoic muttered these 3 words and nodded to indicate that she understood. "Mu Qingya has a backup plan," the little stoic said gravely. Based on her research and understanding of her old rival, Mu Qingya's move wouldn't be so simple. 16 was probably just here to test the waters. Mo Lien smirked. "I don't care what move she has. Let her die." Originally, she was hiding in the shadows, so naturally, no one would notice her. But now, she had appeared in the open. They were already on guard against a weakling without any cultivation. If they were harmed by her again, wouldn't their IQ be low? Crack, crack. The fissures on the street's surface abruptly widened under the human-headed lion beast's stomps. Arbor turned to look at the road they came from and saw thick smoke billowing as a group of neither humans nor beasts moved toward them. Chapter 4306. The bone-chilling cries of harpies also came from above. Mo Lien held Arbor's hand and said to everyone, "Retreat to the inner city first. Release the arrows." "Wait. Release them." Fan Meng hurriedly abandoned Holy Sun Mi Yen, who was fighting, and flew onto the roof, grabbing the arm of a black-clothed masked man. "Vice Hall Master Meng, are you going to stop me again?" The masked man said eerily and coldly as he glanced at Fan Meng eerily. "Vice Hall Master Goe, don't you see that Hall Master Gong is also below? Are you releasing the arrows now to kill him and replace him?" "Nonsense." A vicious glint shot out of the masked man's eyes, and he shouted harshly, "I'm cautious and conscientious for our organization, and I don't dare to slack off in the slightest. I'm wholeheartedly working for heavenly fate without any selfish motives." Vice Hall Master Meng, on the other hand, you've always had a close relationship with that stoic face. Are you reluctant to kill him? Heh. Release the arrows immediately. Release them. Don't release them. Fan Meng was instantly flustered and exasperated, and she pushed Vice Hall Master Gui fiercely. Vice Hall Master Gui staggered on the roof and furiously took out a pitch-black wood grain print from his pocket. He roared loudly, "Everyone, listen to me for now. Release the lightning. Release the arrows." Fan Meng's pupils contracted, and she felt that the scene before her was about to go out of control. Sure enough, whoosh, 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 whoosh. Countless small lightning swords darted over and shot toward Arbor's group below, along with the dense rain of arrows that resembled locusts passing through the forest. The members of the Phoenix clan had already set up a defensive array in the outer circle. Hundreds of swords swept away the dense rain of arrows that shot down from above, and their eyes revealed calm and fearless expressions. Arbor looked up and glared at Vice Hall Master Gui furiously. Most of the believers of heavenly fate on the roof had died from the dense explosion of godly power beads just now. However, there were truly too many people sent by heavenly fate today. After one batch died, another batch came up. There were truly too many to count. Were they determined to take down devastating City Island? If Joy City was their first stop on land, then Devastating Island would probably be their first stop on water. Arbor took a deep breath. Do the disciples of the Heavenly Fate sect want to unify the land and sea and be unparalleled in the world? He really wanted to know what the leader of their organization was thinking. After conquering the world with corpses, the world would be filled with zombies and puppets. What fun would it be for him to lead a small team? If they just wanted to prove themselves, then the price they had to pay might not be too high. As everyone brandished their arrows, they protected the little stoic and retreated backwards. The gate of the inner island was already open. Her Majesty the Queen, dressed in black tight armor, led a group of female soldiers on horseback and came forward quickly. Arbor and the others met them face to face. The Queen quickly gestured to everyone, and the team quickly split into two sides, leaving a path in the middle for them to retreat. Defend! At the Queen's command, the female soldiers in the front row quickly squatted down, took out their iron shields, and quickly formed a defensive shield formation to block the dense flying arrows. Arbor and the others retreated to the city gate and heard a chuckle. "We meet again, Arbor." Arbor couldn't help but frown when he heard that voice. He abruptly turned his head, and sure enough, he saw Sikong Fulling standing there and looking at him with a smile. Unafraid of the little stoic's cold glare, Sikong Fulling tossed the small black bell in her hand with a grin. "Let's not talk about friendship. How about we make a simple transaction?" Chapter 40, 307. Arbor's gaze landed on Sikong Fulling's hand, and his attention was completely focused on the earthly treasure, the heavenly bell. Currently, her divine sense was shrouded by the mirror image spirit locking formation, so she couldn't communicate with Qiuqiu normally for the time being. However, she could still vaguely sense some of Little Six's faintly discernible aura. "You captured Little Six?" Arbor looked at Sikong Fulling with a grim expression. This woman was dressed in a thin red muslin dress. Her lips were red, her teeth were white, and she was charming and enchanting. She was an extremely pretty girl. But why was her personality so unlikable? She had come to find trouble with her time and time again, so her patience was about to be completely exhausted. "Someone who can threaten me in this world hasn't been born yet." The little stoic's wrist shook lightly, and several wooden vines that wriggled like snakes slithered out from between her fingers and directly smashed toward the earthly treasure, the heavenly bell, in Sikong Fulling's hand. As expected of the sacred wood origin, her wood spirit control was so adept. Sikong Fulling sighed ruefully, but her expression didn't change in the slightest. "The deal I made with you is extremely simple." Sikong Fulling sidestepped to avoid the vines and hastily called out, "And it's a convenient move for you. You only need to come with me to see my brother." Seacombe Fulling suddenly stood motionless in her original spot and raised the earthly treasure, the heavenly bell, in front of Arbor. "I'll return it to you." One of Arbor's vine whips landed heavily on her arm. Only a slap was heard, and a bloody wound instantly appeared on Seacombe Fulling's fair arm. Her hand had originally been injured when she grabbed Arbor's vine whips. Now that the new injury had suddenly increased, the old injury split open again, and blood dripped to the ground, but she didn't bat an eyelid. "Miss Seacombe, why are you like this?" Mu Xingqian couldn't resist sighing as he looked at the young woman in front of him and slowly shook his head. Seacombe Fulling was also a stubborn person. To a certain extent, she was also someone who would do anything to achieve her goals. Suffering a small injury was completely insignificant to her as long as she could achieve her goal on this trip. Arbor stared coldly at the woman in front of him and swung his vine whip at her face. "Crown Princess." Meng Meiyu and the others cried out in alarm and wanted to help. However, Seacombe Fulling merely calmly raised her hand and looked at Arbor as she said, "If you want to vent your anger, go ahead and hit me. Just come with me after you're done." Arbor let out a cold snort. The vine whip that was about to strike her didn't fall. Instead, it shattered into bits of wood spirit star and returned to her palm. Arbor stared at Seacombe Fulling with a cold and expressionless face for a long while before sneering again. "You're really interesting." Seacombe Fulling lowered her eyebrows and coldly said, "You will know when you see him." "Why am I in such a hurry to find you?" Mo Lien sized her up. "What's wrong? Cult Master Ding is about to die?" Seacombe Fulling's expression changed drastically as she turned to glare at Mo Lien. Of course not. She wasn't? Then why was she in such a hurry to follow his Jojo and insist that Jojo meet that person? Prince Mo was secretly displeased as he imagined a series of bizarre scenarios. In the end, he actually imagined a scene of Cult Master Ding sacrificing himself for a righteous cause for his Qiao Zhuanglia. He immediately thundered himself. He hurriedly transformed into a small killing Buddha and chopped away all those messy images in his mind. Big Brother is in the river of forgetfulness right now, so it doesn't conflict with where you are going. Chapter 4308. Arbor looked at her expressionlessly. After a while, she said, "You love him a lot?" Everyone looked at their Qiao in bewilderment. Didn't this topic change feel a little strange? The Crown Prince looked down at his wife in astonishment. What was going on? There was something wrong with his wife's style. She had always been expressionless and cold. When did she start talking about such a cloying topic with someone? If she wanted to talk, shouldn't she talk to a close friend like Xian Xian? Seacombe Fulling was also dumbfounded by her question. Then, she flew into a rage out of humiliation. "What nonsense are you talking about? Liar." Arbor sized her up with a cold face. "A liar once told me that if you love someone, you have to confess to them. If you don't confess, they might not know for the rest of their lives. Although the other party might feel troubled if you confess. But if you don't confess, won't the rest of your life pass just like that? That liar even said that if you love someone, you can give up everything for them." Arbor continued to lecture expressionlessly. "You don't even care about your life for Ding Yun, and you still say you don't love him. Damn liar, you're all lying to me." Arbor's cold gaze instantly sank to the bottom of an ice cave, making Seacombe Fulling, who was standing opposite her, feel an inexplicable sense of suffocation. This feeling was very strange and abnormal. It was as if the girl in front of her might appear in front of you in the next second and reach out to snap your neck. Mo Lien's heart jolted, and he pulled his wife back into his embrace. He patted her fluffy head. "Qiao Qiao, there's no need to mind the damn swindler's words. If you don't like damn liars, we can just kill them." Seacombe Fulling still didn't know what had happened earlier, so she naturally couldn't understand that Arbor had shifted her anger onto her. They were all damn liars, but a bunch of male liars and a female liar were the same in nature. They were all liars who were here to deceive Jojo. Seacombe Fulling just had a super strong premonition of danger, so she had a strong desire to live. In this world, love is one kind, and respect and love is another. I respect and love my brother. It's not what you think. I didn't lie to you. I didn't lie to you from the beginning. I was the one who caught the holy wood fragment. I just want you to promise me one thing. After we go to the river of forgetfulness, come with me to see my brother. It's that simple. Sikong Fulling stretched out her hand, her blood-stained fingers holding that earth treasure, heavenly bell. She raised it horizontally and pushed it forward again. Although I, Sikong Fulling, am not a good person, I also disdain to deceive people. That's it. Whether you believe it or not, what I said is the truth. Qiao Mu swept her an indifferent glance before abruptly extending her hand and sucking that earthly treasure, the heavenly bell, into her hand. He lifted the earth treasure, heaven and earth bell, and grabbed the scrambling wooden vine without any hindrance. Fragment Little Six acted as if it had seen a relative it hadn't seen in 800 years, and it scurried into her sleeve. Arbor reached out to pacify it before temporarily keeping it in his sleeve. With a flick of his hand, he tossed the earth treasure, heavenly bell, back into Sikong Fulling's hands. Now that I've taken Little Six back, aren't you worried that I'll go back on my word at any time? Sikong Fulling raised her brows and hung that small bell on the embroidered pouch at her waist. How can I not understand you? You're willing to suffer for your pride. You'll keep your promise no matter what, and definitely won't go back on it. Chapter 4309. The little stoic glared in the direction that Sikong Fulling had turned to leave, her small face puffed up with anger. Mo Lian looked down and couldn't resist chuckling. She reached out to pinch her cheeks. Everything else aside, this person really understands you quite well. Mu Xingchen also smiled, but he couldn't resist knitting his brows when he turned around. Judging from the situation outside, the direction of Devastating Island's harbor has been blocked. It'll probably be very difficult to leave now. A large number of harpies filled the sky outside the city. Countless zombies disembarked from the two ships, and even human-headed lion beasts attacked together. The entire Devastating Island could be said to be in a precarious situation. A female official swiftly came over and saluted Arbor and the others. The Queen invites everyone to the royal palace to take shelter. Her Highness the Princess is injured? No need to worry. She's just exhausted. Female official Zhao walked over while supporting the blood-soaked Qing Xuexue. When the latter saw Arbor, she hastily asked, "Did my maidservant bring Xiao Chaoer back?" Arbor took out that sliding wooden vine from his sleeve and expressionlessly nodded at her. Qing Xuexue sighed in relief. "That's great. Female official Zhao, bring them back to the palace first. Your Highness the Princess, Her Majesty the Queen has ordered for you to return to the palace with young Master Mo and the others." "No. Mother's personal guards can't hold on for too long. There are too many zombies outside. I have to go help her." Female official Zhao grabbed Qing Xuexue, who couldn't even stand steadily, and said gravely, "Your Highness the Princess should properly protect yourself right now. Look at you can't even stand, so how can you help Her Majesty the Queen? If you go over, you'll only be a burden to Her Majesty." Qing Xuexue stopped talking and looked down at herself before turning to look at Arbor and the others. "Let's go." When she turned to look, the originally bustling beauty plaza was now pitted with potholes and desolation. There were dilapidated walls, ravines, and trenches everywhere, and the beauty statues were already toppled to the ground in tatters. Looking into the distance, it was also a scene of desolation. Not a single spot was intact. Qing Xuexue followed Arbor and the others back to the Queen's palace with complicated emotions. She was helped to sit on the ground. Arbor took out a few bottles of spirit-restoring medicinal liquid from his storage talisman and handed them to Qing Xuexue and the others. Qing Xuexue looked up and nodded at her. "Thank you." Arbor turned to look at her husband. "How long will the mirror image sealing array set up by the ancient bronze mirror seal our consciousness?" Compared to her, her husband was more knowledgeable in array formations, so he should be able to see through the mystery behind it. As expected, Mo Lian didn't disappoint his wife. "Jojo, don't worry. It won't last long. Besides, we're already out of the range of the great god-sealing spell. It should be undone in about an hour." Only then did Qiao Mu relax. After getting used to being tricked in the top academies, Lord Jojo, developed a small habit. He liked to carry a small bag on his back when he went out on adventures. He also liked to stuff storage talismans in his waist, sleeves, and embroidered pouches. The storage talismans contained all kinds of weapons, hidden weapons, talismans, and pills. They were used to prevent the situation where one's consciousness was sealed and one's inner world and star region couldn't be opened, so they could be used at any time. Therefore, after being tricked so many times, there would always be some improvement. "Your Highness the Princess." A few maids rushed over and yelled, covered in blood. Tushan family is rebelling, and quite a few cultivation families under their control are rebelling as well.
What?
Qing Shueshua opened her eyes, a trace of anger flashing through them. Chapter 43:10. How can this be? Qing Shueshua's breathing instantly became a little chaotic. It was really chaotic. When the corpse puppets attacked, although they were frightened, at least their hearts weren't panicked. But now, even the largest Tushan family on Devastating Island had rebelled. What chance did they have to win against Tianyun? The young master Songfeng beside you is the hall master of Tianyun's underground hall, Gong Songfeng. Arbor threw another shocking news to Qing Shueshua, which stunned the latter and made her unable to come back to her senses. Young master Songfeng? Qing Shueshua couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. Was it that elegant young master who stood tall like bamboo and seemed to be born without a temper? That person actually didn't have much of a presence. When he followed behind her all day, he didn't speak much. Qing Shueshua was having fun and completely forgot about this person. Just like when she was strolling on the street with Xiao Chaober in her arms, that man followed beside her indifferently. After a long time, she left him behind. If Arbor didn't deliberately mention it now, she wouldn't have remembered this young master. Actually, no one knew that Qing Shueshua was a little androphobic. As the first successor of Devastating Female Kingdom, she actually panicked when she saw men. Naturally, this kind of thing couldn't be known by the whole world. Her Majesty the Queen seemed to have heard about this matter, but she only thought that Qing Shueshua was still childish and immature. Anyway, the time had come. After this princess inherited the throne, she would definitely expand the kingdom. Arbor didn't care about how surprised Qing Shueshua was and continued to say faintly, "This Hall Master Gong has already brought people to infiltrate your devastating island and dealt with your Tushan family. After some coercion and bribery, your Tushan family suddenly rebelled. Is it hard to guess? The conditions offered by Tianyun must be very tempting." Emolian nodded and said. Qing Shueshua clenched her fists tightly and said in a deep voice with reddened eyes, "So, what if it's tempting? When some things are settled, they will no longer have any value. It's unknown whether these people will live or die." That's true. Mu Xingchen couldn't help but sigh. The disciples of Tianyun can betray and bite others at any time. After all, they needed an endless stream of fresh people to expand their corpse puppet warehouse. How could they create a world of peace for others? Arbor glanced at Qing Shueshua. "What do you plan to do now?" "Her Majesty the Queen." "Her Majesty the Queen is here." "Your Majesty the Queen." The group of maids cried out excitedly. Qingyi came to her daughter's side and hugged her tightly. "Child, go with Qiao Qiao and the others." "Mother." "Minister He, take the children through the secret passage." The queen turned to look at the middle-aged woman with a calm expression. He Luan nodded and said, "Your Majesty, please take care of yourself." Qing's mother's mother had a little mother B's mother B, had been had have a Shueshua, T, hers mother's had. Qing's Her Majesty patted her shoulder and smiled faintly. As the queen, mother has her own mission. Even if Devastating Island is about to perish, mother still has to live and die with her people. Qing Shueshua cried out anxiously. Beside her, Maid Zhao's movements were very nimble. She slapped the princess unconscious. Chapter 43:11. Arbor expressionlessly reached out to support Qing Shueshua, who was falling towards his side. He looked up at the queen. "Let's go together." "I can do my best." Qingyi shook her head and interrupted Arbor. "Good child. take Xue Xue and her 300 personal guards and leave together. Let Aunt Yi take care of the rest. Mu Xingchen frowned and disagreed. Your Majesty, if you stay, you'll only be making some unnecessary sacrifices. Why don't you listen to Jojo and take as many people as possible? Let's all leave together. Qingyi smiled amiably at them and shook her head again. If everyone leaves together, who will stay behind to stop Tianyun's people? Aunt Yi promises you, I'll definitely do my best to protect myself and more people. Even if this devastating island is completely destroyed, I definitely won't let it remain as Tianyun's base. Pass down my order. Take them with you. Immediately. Qingyi flung her sleeves and quickly turned around, not looking at Arbor and the others anymore. Come back. Arbor angrily roared as he supported Qing Shueshue. Mo Lian reached out and grabbed her small hand. Jojo, let her go. There are still so many subjects left on this island. As the queen, it is impossible for her to leave these people behind and leave alone. Long Shangyun said with a cold face. That's right. Queen Qingyi is a famous war goddess in and out of Wangchuan. She'll be fine. We should immediately take Qing Shueshue and leave this place. Long Shi looked at Arbor with a complicated expression. This cousin was cold-hearted and heartless. What she was showing now was not the case. But wasn't she just a simple and adorable little cousin? But she definitely wasn't. At least in front of him and his sister, this little girl was like a devil. There are at least 30,000 people on Devastating Island. We can't take them all at once. How do you know it's impossible? Arbor retorted unhappily. Yes, even if cousin sister can use the storage talisman to take them away, but now it's chaotic outside. Those islanders are hiding everywhere. Are you going to find them one by one? Long Huan asked with a serious face. Arbor knew that it was impossible. She was just annoyed and couldn't help but want to scold him. All right, that's enough. Mu Xingchen grumpily stopped Long Huan before turning to say to Qiao Qiao. Qiao Qiao, young Master Long's words aren't without reason. How about we leave this place with Sir He first? We have to get far away from this mirror image godlocking matrix and return after our divine conscious recovers. Xiao Mu nodded and looked at Heal Wan, who was standing on the side. Everyone, this way, please. Heal Wan immediately understood and led everyone to a secret passage in the palace without saying a word. This secret passageway was built under the queen's bedchamber, and it was connected to a water vein. After walking out of the passageway, they saw a white beach, and the clear sea water was already rippling under their feet. A large cargo ship was parked not far from the shore. There were 2 cargo cabins on both sides and a flat deck in the middle. There were 4 to 5 spirit stone cannons on the side of the ship's railing. It seemed that the queen had prepared them for them. Let's go. Heal Wan turned and nodded at Arbor and the others. Then, she leaped toward the bow of the ship. Arbor, Mo Lian, and the others led 100 Phoenix Brothers and Qing Shueshue's 300 personal guards and jumped onto the ship. In the sky not far away, the harpies' furious roars could be heard. Chapter 43:12. Everyone looked up and saw a large group of harpies rushing towards them from the direction of the dock. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and Holy Sun Mi Yen flew to Arbor's side at an extremely fast speed. They've discovered us. We have to leave quickly. Those things with human heads and lion bodies can't come over. Once they enter the water, they can only attack us by flying. If they were only dealing with these harpies with low attack power, it wouldn't matter even if their divine senses were temporarily locked. The situation was urgent, but Heal Wan didn't lose her composure. She ordered coldly, "Raise the anchor immediately. Let's go." The large ship responded by raising the anchor and immediately set off, heading towards the vast water area ahead. Arbor took out hundreds of bows and arrows from his storage talisman and threw them to the phoenixes and Qing Shueshue's 300 personal guards. He leaped onto the ship's bow first and released a black gold arrow as a demonstration. He said with a cold expression, "Shoot between the eyebrows. There's a mutated black crystal here." As the arrow flew, it made a sound as it pierced through the air. Everyone had different expressions as they watched the little crown princess shoot the harpies flying at the front into the water with one arrow, creating a huge splash. The phoenixes almost exclaimed out loud. Arbor turned his head and glanced at them. Only then did they give up. Who's sneaking around? Arbor turned his head and saw that Qing Shueshue had slowly woken up. The female attendant's scolding came from the opposite cargo hold. Not long after, they saw a woman in revealing clothes. Her arms were twisted and she was pushed and shoved in front of everyone. Xiaomu gracefully landed on the deck and cast a sidelong glance at that woman. Hongsa, why are you here? Qing Shueshue was slightly startled. Qing Hongsa glared at Qing Shueshue with anger in her eyes. She scolded like a cannonball, "Of course you don't want to see me here. If I wasn't smart enough to sneak here early, I would still be on beautiful City Island. My neck might have been slit by now."
How can that be?
Qing Shueshue muttered. Qing Hongsa jumped up as if she was stung by a wasp. She roared angrily. Mother is so biased. In the face of imminent disaster, only you are allowed to leave. They're both her biological daughters. How can she favor one and discriminate against the other? Fortunately, she was quick-witted and managed to slip away a step earlier. Unfortunately, her other sisters were probably already dead by now. Hongse, your maternal grandfather's family has colluded with the All-Seer clan and rebelled. Of course, Qinghong knew that Tishan family was rebelling. Because of this, she wanted to run even more. Who knew if Tishan family would sell her out after they joined the Sky Fortune family? How many times had Tishan family betrayed their masters for glory? She was just a granddaughter. In the face of the entire family's interests, she was nothing. It's Princess Hongsa. He Luan raised her hand and ordered her men to release her. Qing Hongsa clutched her arm that was almost broken. Her gaze casually swept over Emolian, He-chun, and the others. Her tone was incomparably sour as she said, Mother is really good to you. Even while fleeing, she didn't forget to give you some beautiful men to accompany you." As if thinking of the 18 beautiful men that the queen had bestowed upon Qing Shueshue, a trace of indignation flashed across Qing Hongsa's face. Favoring one and discriminating against the other was extremely biased. Qing Shueshue was speechless. She glanced apologetically at Arbor and said, "This is my third sister, Qing Hongsa. Sister Qiao, please don't take offense."
Hey, look.
Isn't beautiful City Island sinking? Chapter 43:13. Qingcheng Island is indeed sinking. When Xiaomu turned around to look, she saw the scene of an imminent disaster. The entire devastating island was sinking into the sea. The lush green island was disappearing bit by bit in front of everyone. Qing Shueshue and the 300 personal guards were naturally dumbfounded. They dashed to the second layer of the fence as if they had gone mad. They stretched out their hands towards the distant beautiful island. Mother, how can Mother be so decisive? Auntie Yi said that even if the entire island disappears, she will not let this place become Tianyun's base. So this is what she means? Arbor looks at the sinking Qingcheng Island and feels his head is in pain. It was really unexpected that things would suddenly turn out this way. At first there should be a better way to take Qing Yi and everyone away, but now... Ha. Do you see it? Do you see it? King Hunks pointed at the sunken island in the distance and angrily yelled, "That's my good mother, my good mother." The time she sent Qing Shueshue away, she didn't care about her life. If it's not because she is smart enough to run away, this time she'll sink with everyone on Qingcheng Island. Perhaps only Qing Shueshue's life is important and hers is not? At this time, Qiao Mu was suffering from a headache, so when she heard this woman yelling beside her, she was instantly enraged. With a wave of her hand, 2 Phoenix clan members immediately ran forward and tied up the screaming Qing Hongsa. They even thoughtfully stuffed a piece of cloth into her mouth to gag her.
Woo.
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 King Hongs glared at Xiao Mu and the others with accusation in her eyes. How can this woman be so excessive? She is just telling the truth. Why don't they give her a chance to talk? Big Sister Qiao. Qing Shueshue stood up with the help of someone. She turned to look at her third sister. Noisy. Xiao Mu waved her hand again, and the two Phoenix clansmen dragged Qing Hongsa into the cargo hold. They directly tossed her inside and closed the hatch with a clatter. That was it. At this moment, everyone was busy dealing with the group of harpies flying over their heads. No one had the time to listen to Qing Hongsa's nonsense. The speed of the ship was not slow, but the harpies' flying speed seemed to be faster. Qing Shueshue's 300 bodyguards stood at the bow of the ship and continuously shot arrows. Indeed, many of the harpies were shot. However, after less than an hour, although the number of harpies had decreased, everyone was panting due to the excessive consumption of spiritual energy. It was naturally inappropriate for this to continue. Arbor narrowed his eyes and took out some spirit-restoring medicinal liquid from the storage talisman and distributed it to everyone. Use the Spirit Stone Cannon. Arbor walked towards the stairs on the other side of the ship. He glanced coldly at the harpies in the sky who were quickly surrounding them. The members of the Phoenix clan hurriedly gathered. There were several Spirit Stone cannons placed in front of the fence, which were perfect for shooting at these reckless harpies. Following a series of clattering sounds, the little stoic poured out a lot of spirit stones from a storage talisman. The several members of the Phoenix clan standing in front of the spirit stone cannons were startled at first, and then prepared to place the spirit stones on the cannons. However, after the spirit stones inside the storage talisman were piled up with a clattering sound, everyone's expressions gradually turned to astonishment. She still hasn't finished pouring them out? How many spirit stones were stored inside Lady Holy Daughter's storage talisman? After the Wind Clan members were stunned for a moment, they hastily formed groups of 3 to 5 and surrounded a spirit stone cannon. Chapter 43:14. With the addition of the spirit stone cannons and the princess's personal guards drinking the medicinal liquid to replenish their spiritual energy, their morale increased greatly. A large group of harpies were hit by the spirit stone cannons and fell into the water, making splashing sounds. Arbor stared coldly at the things that fell into the water, unable to hide the gloominess in her heart. If these things fell into the water, they would definitely pollute the water source. Although she had already scattered some antidotes to avoid the corpse poison, it could only be said to have a certain effect. Once these corpses that sank into the water were eaten by the fishes, it would definitely cause a large number of fish to mutate in the future. As for whether these little things would turn into corpses or develop in a better direction, this was unknown. After about half an hour, the ship gradually moved further away. Suddenly, a short whistle came from the direction of Devastating Island. Hundreds and thousands of harpies flapped their wings and stopped in the air, no longer pursuing them. They turned around and headed in the direction of Devastating Island. Divine sense can be used, Mo Lien muttered, then released her divine sense to explore Devastating Island that was slowly sinking into the water. After a great battle, Devastating Island was almost completely submerged in the water. Only a faint light gold could be seen on the surface of the sea, rippling slowly in the water. It was like the light of the sea revealing a trace of gentleness in the dusk, but Qing Shueshue was very clear. It was the top of the palace's pagoda, emitting the last trace of light. When the sky darkened and the last ray of light was replaced by the spreading darkness of the night, the surface of the water finally quieted down. The princess's 300 personal guards walked down the stairs tiredly, each finding a place to sit down and rest. 1/3 of the spirit stones had been used, and there was still a large pile left in front of the spirit stone cannons. On the other hand, Long Shangyun cast a complicated glance at Xiao Mu. This cousin of hers had a very strange temperament. She was obviously a super rich person who could casually grab a handful of spirit stones and pile them up into a mountain. Previously, she wanted to scam the two of them, and she was simply too happy to do so. Long Huan was also speechless and looked at Arbor, who was standing at the bow of the ship. The latter was lowering his head to check the extent of damage to the spirit stone cannons and did not notice the sneaky glances behind him. When Long Huan thought of the large ship he had bought previously, he could not help but feel a headache coming on. He had almost taken out all the money he had on him to buy that ship. However, a few days later, it was smashed into pieces at the port of Enchanting Island, and there was no way to repair it. How could this be described as a trap? If he had known that this ship would be scrapped at the port of Enchanting Island, he would not have bought it. He would have rented his cousin's scarlet firmament blue waves for a few days. Thinking of this, Long Huan rolled his eyes a few times. In his heart, there was a turbid air that could not be released for a long time. Since he brought his cousin home, Long Qian felt that he had never had a smooth journey. Hui Hui felt extremely uncomfortable holding her breath. Speaking of which, this cousin of his was probably the natural nemesis of the Forgotten River Dragon clan? Otherwise, how could he be able to completely suppress the siblings every time? What is she doing? Long Xiangyun raised her head and looked at Arbor, who was standing in front of the fence on the second floor. She couldn't help but frown. Long Qi looked over again. He saw that expressionless little girl standing in front of the fence, her sleeves fluttering and her white hands brushing back and forth. Pieces of white medicinal powder rustled and fell into the sea. Chapter 43:15. It seems to be purifying the waters here. Long Huan sighed heavily after looking for a while. Will this medicine work? Long Xiangyun asked hesitantly. It's better than doing nothing. Long Xiangyun pursed her lips, and her gaze swept back and forth over Arbor's back. That's true. Her Highness the Royal Highness, Long Huan's gaze landed on Qing Shueshue. He still remembered the first time they met. That Royal Highness had a mischievous smile as she blended into the crowd and said to his stoic cousin, "Since you flirted with someone else's big brother, you have to take responsibility, right? You mustn't flirt and deny it." At that time, that smiling face that wished for the world to be plunged into chaos was simply a world of difference from the silent aura she currently exuded. It had only been 2 days. The ruthlessness of the Heavenly Fate Empire was evident from this. Once it made a move and launched an attack on its target, perhaps no patrician family would be able to handle it alone. Unwittingly, this Heavenly Fate Empire seemed to have grown to an unattainable level. No one could remain unscathed in this kind of chaotic world. Qing Shueshue didn't know how long she had been standing next to the railing. After nightfall, everything in the surroundings, including the air, seemed to have stopped flowing. In the depths of her eyes, there was only that silent island in the distance. She didn't know what kind of power could make the entire devastating women's kingdom sink to the bottom of the water. She also didn't know how she should proceed on her future path. Before her eyes was a sea of confusion, frustration, and melancholy. The several Phoenix clansmen who rode flying spirit beasts to investigate devastating island quietly returned and landed next to Arbor. After the little stoic finished patting the last bit of medicinal powder on her hand, she turned to look at them, inquiring with her eyes. One of the Phoenix clansmen immediately cupped his hands respectfully and said, "Lady Saintess, the Heavenly Fate Empire's people have already withdrawn from that sunken island." The Heavenly Fate Empire naturally had to withdraw since the island had sunk. Otherwise, would it be planted in the middle of the water? We dove into the water and dived several dozen kilometers, but we didn't find any clues. The entire devastating island seemed to have sunk several thousand kilometers into the bottom of the sea along with its people, and they couldn't find any traces at all. We didn't find anyone alive. Qing Shueshue's fingers gripped the railing of the boat tightly. She raised her head slightly, and 2 lines of tears fell silently. She knew that crying was useless at a time like this, but she still couldn't stop her tears. She just couldn't stop them. Arbor raised his hand and patted her shoulder. His voice was calm as he said, "Think positively. Perhaps there is a teleportation array under the water. Perhaps Her Majesty has already escaped with some people." Really? Qing Shueshue's back stiffened as she stood there. A wisp of moonlight fell on her hair, faintly illuminating a touch of warm snow. "Although I haven't spent much time with your mother, I feel that Her Majesty isn't someone who would make promises easily. Since she said that she would do her best to protect herself and more people, I believe that she will be able to do it." Qing Shueshue turned her head slightly. Her line of sight came into contact with that pair of cold and bright eyes. She was absent-minded for a moment. Then, she nodded heavily and said in a muffled voice, "Mother will be fine."
Perhaps it was as Sister Chiao said.
Mother was doing her best to protect these subjects of hers as much as possible. She had to have faith in Mother. Chapter 43:16. Perhaps they really did escape through the transportation formation. That wasn't impossible. Sister Chiao, don't worry. Qing Shueshue turned to look resolutely at Arbor and said, "I won't wallow in self-pity or feel melancholy. I will become even more spirited and strong. When I meet Mother and my clansmen again, I will prove to them that I can also be a responsible royal daughter. When danger comes again, I can take over Mother's sword without hesitation and protect my people in her place." The little stoic expressionlessly curled her lips. He Luan, who was standing far below the ship's mast, couldn't help but reveal a gratified smile. Perhaps this crisis wasn't a bad thing after all. The royal daughter seemed to have grown up overnight. Long Shongyun looked up at the two people for a moment before turning around to see her elder brother looking at her strangely. "What's wrong?" Long Qian felt that his younger sister had been paying too much attention to the stoic face recently. She could stand here and watch the little stoic and the royal daughter talk for so long. If this was any other time, his younger sister would have been impatient to the extreme by now. The two people were talking in front of the railing on the second floor. Their voices were so low that he could only vaguely hear the lingering echoes of their conversation traveling with the wind. Just like this, his younger sister could stand here for a long time and watch in a daze. It was simply baffling. "I want to ask you what's wrong." Long Qian couldn't resist sizing her up. "Nothing." Long Shongyun harumphed and turned to leave without looking back. "I just realized that the stoic face isn't as annoying as I imagined." Long Qian was startled. He looked at his younger sister's back and chuckled helplessly after a while. "But that's all." Long Shongyun waved her hand and harumphed again before walking briskly toward the cargo hold. Time to sleep. It was almost daybreak after a night of torment. Seriously, she was exhausted to death. Crash. As soon as she pulled open the cargo hold door, she saw something fall in front of her with a bang. Long Shongyun hastily dodged backward, avoiding the thing that was thrown at her. She couldn't help but be amused when she focused her eyes. It turned out that Qing Hongsa saw someone open the door and swiftly pounced at her. She dodged and naturally fell flat on her back. "What are you doing?" Long Shongyun angrily roared. "Woo, woo, woo, woo." Qing Hongsa was flustered and exasperated, her face flushed red. Long Shongyun rolled her eyes. She raised her hand and summoned a long sword from her consciousness. As the sword light flashed, it lifted the cloth in Qing Hongsa's mouth, scaring the latter into letting out an ear-piercing scream. Let me go, let me go." "I can't do that." Long Shongyun shrugged and glanced at her. Qing Hongsa's hands and feet were wrapped in vines that were as thick as bowls. She had no ability to break through the layers of pure wood spirit energy. This was the masterpiece of young Master Feng Zhongfei. "If you have nothing to do, then go out. Don't disturb my sleep." Long Shongyun impatiently threw Qing Hongsa out of the cabin and closed the door to rest. Qing Hongsa was so angry that her entire body trembled. When Qing Shueshue saw this, she hastily jumped down and landed in front of Qing Hongsa. She turned to look at the little stoic. "Sister Chiao, release my third sister first." "Third sister, don't make a fuss. It's fine now." Arbor glanced at Qing Hongsa. The wood spirit energy between his fingers moved slightly, and the 9 layers of wood spirit energy enveloping Qing Hongsa obediently dissipated. Chapter 43:17. It then drifted to Arbor's fingers. Qing Shueshue was a bit stupefied. This was her first time seeing someone control the wood spirit so purely. To be able to extract someone else's 9th level wood spirit so quickly, it was as if all the wood spirit energy in the world that could be manipulated could be used by her. Looking at the specks of wood spirit energy floating between her smooth and jade-like fingers, it was as if they were little fairies dancing in the wind under the cover of the night. Qing Hongsa was also dumbfounded. She then grumpily jumped up and pointed at Qing Shueshue as she angrily said, "Don't think I'll appreciate your kindness if you put in a good word for me." Third sister, the entire devastating island has sunk. What nonsense are you spouting? Qing Hongsa angrily glared at him before widening her eyes in astonishment. She hastily rushed to the second deck and looked into the distance in shock. Our home has completely sunk to the bottom of the sea. Arbor turned around and squinted tiredly. She then saw her peerlessly graceful husband standing in the shadow of the ship's mast with a small bowl in one hand. He was tall and slender, and his phoenix eyes glinted faintly as he smiled faintly at her. At this moment, it was as if all the fatigue and discomfort in her body had been swept away, and the little stoic hastily ran over to him. "After fighting for so long, you only drank a bowl of tofu pudding midway. I guess that you must be hungry. Go rest after eating the congee. Leave the rest to hubby." Arbor reached out to take the bowl and stirred the warm corn congee with a spoon. She raised her head and curved her eyes at him. "Ayaya, you two are slacking off here again." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's figure drifted to their side. He reached out to grab the small bowl in Arbor's hand. "This venerable one wants to see what this is." Mo Lian expressionlessly extended an arm to block that person's restless claws. "It's for wifey. You don't have a share." "Jojo." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked pitifully at the little lady and winked at her aggrievedly. Mo Lian didn't give him a chance to continue fooling around. She directly grabbed his hand and dragged him away. "Get to work. My life is so miserable. Jojo, the Crown Prince has enslaved me." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal wailed as he was dragged 3 steps away. Arbor had just eaten a mouthful of corn porridge when he saw the guy looking back at him with an aggrieved expression. He couldn't help but chuckle. Mo Lian hastily turned her head and saw the little stoic standing in the pitch-black night. A speck of moonlight illuminated her almond-shaped eyes that were as clear as water. She smiled sweetly. Her eyes were curved and gentle, as if there was endless starlight in them. It was so beautiful that it could steal the good fortune of heaven and earth. The Crown Prince was stunned. He unconsciously let go of the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's hand. Ji Chen's brows slightly flashed, and he let out a faint laugh. He turned his head and took the opportunity to punch Prince Mo's head, laughing heartily as he dragged him away. "What are you waiting for?" Mo Lian came back to her senses. She rubbed her head with one hand and couldn't help but kick him. Sneak attacking someone when they're unprepared is not what a hero should do. "Jojo, Mo Lian kicked me. Is there anything else you can do other than complain?" "I can't. Can the two of you stop fighting?" "Let's set up the defensive barrier first," Holy Sun Mi Yen said helplessly. "Although this place looks calm and peaceful, there might be dangers lurking in every corner under the sea." Holy Sun Mi Yen continued to persuade, "Set up the defensive barrier first before you go fight elsewhere." Light and shadow flickered on the ship. Everyone looked up in unison and saw a transparent layer of watercolored defensive barrier slowly covering the ship before slowly descending. Chapter 43:18. Ah, ah, ah. Only the person sitting there could hear the wretched screams that came from the depths of the soul. But if an outsider could hear these screams right now, they would definitely find it incomparably tragic. This unfilial descendant. A faintly discernible phantom trembled as he curled up beside the table. He shouted shakily, You humiliate your own ancestor like this. Aren't you afraid of heavenly Tao's annihilation? Aren't you worried that you'll be struck by lightning?" His peach blossom eyes flashed with a cold glint as he looked up, and a severe glint flickered through his eyes. The silvery white flames cast on the old man's body gradually burned fiercely, completely enveloping the phantom in flames and roasting it. Ah, ah, ah. Don't burn. Don't burn. I don't dare to have thoughts of seizing another's nest. Really. Brat, brat. You burning me to death won't benefit you at all. You can't control such a powerful devil emperor bloodline. Don't burn, don't burn. I'm telling you, I can help you summon the devil emperor's sword. Duan Yu's hand paused, and the clusters of silvery white flames that ignited also swayed slightly. The devil emperor's sword. That old man's body drooped as he curled up into a ball. His eyes contained an inexplicable fear as he looked hesitantly at Duan Yu. The ancient devil emperor's sword. After summoning the devil emperor's sword, not only will one's cultivation improve by leaps and bounds, moreover, legend has it that the one who obtains the devil emperor's sword can unify the 3 prefectures in the sea. You'll become the incomparably honorable strongest person in this world. Duan Yu couldn't help but scoff, and the flames in his hand suddenly increased in intensity, burning the old man until he screamed. Don't burn, woo-woo. You old man, you're so oily and slick. Do you think I'll believe your words? Unify the 3 prefectures in the sea? Why don't you say you can control the Holy Realm and command all living things in the world? Do you think I'll believe you when you make it sound so miraculous? You better believe me. The old man waved his transparent palm and raised his head shakily. There are many things in this world that you don't know. Junior, do you want to accept my guidance? Duan Yu's chilling gaze landed on him, and a sneer surfaced on his lips. Old man, if I burn you for another half a month, your soul will probably scatter and scatter. Disobedient. The old man was so angry that his beard trembled, and his entire body trembled. You've been dead for so many years, yet you still miss the mortal world? Wouldn't it be better for you to just disappear? You. The old man was exasperated. What do you know? Duan Yu scoffed and slowly stood up. He coldly stated, I indeed don't understand. An old man who had passed away from ancient times came out to cause trouble. He wanted to possess the body of a junior. If this wasn't a demon, then what was he? Which ancestor could do something so selfish and disregard for ethics? After putting away that half-dead old crook, Duan Yu walked to the door. Just as he reached out to open the door, he saw someone rashly barging in and almost bumping into him. Duan Yu's expression darkened, and he dodged to the side. He retreated 3 steps and flicked his sleeves as he coldly looked at a royal guard dressed in men's clothing who barged in. That fool must have stuck her ear to the door to listen. She barged in as soon as he pulled the door open. Your Majesty. Wu Ruomei coughed awkwardly and hastily knelt down in a well-behaved salute. Someone come, Duan Yu ordered expressionlessly. Chapter 43:19. Wu Ruomei hastily pushed down the hat that didn't fit her head and shouted repeatedly, Don't, I'll go out by myself, As she retreated, she accidentally bumped the back of her head against the door frame. She instantly scrunched up her face on the verge of tears. Duan Yu ignored her and was about to step out when he felt that Wu Ruomei was an eyesore blocking the door. Someone, escort Miss Wu back to the estate. Don't. Wu Ruomei quickly put on a bitter face and muttered softly, Your Majesty, there's a rebellion at Liu Pass and evil bandits are on the loose. Someone has already gone to handle this matter. Duan Yu glanced at her indifferently. Do you know that your father was looking for you everywhere inside and outside the city yesterday? Wu Ruomei pursed her lips and said, Of course I know. He wants me to go meet that damn wastrel. I won't go. The junior eunuch on the side silently lowered his eyes and speechlessly asked the heavens, So, eldest Miss Wu, you hid in the palace overnight just to hide from your father? Go inform Prime Minister Wu, Duan Yu ordered expressionlessly. Xiao Kezi lowered his head and whispered, Reporting to your Majesty, this servant has already sent someone to inform the Prime Minister estate. Wu Ruomei angrily glared at Xiao Kezi before kneeling in front of Duan Yu with a plop. She exclaimed in a pretentious manner, Your Majesty, Commandery Princess Wu Shuang of the Divine Province has formed the Tiger Wolf Battalion and led the female soldiers in red. They are invincible on the battlefield and emerge victorious in every battle, causing a bunch of old men to be terror-stricken and piss their pants in terror. Duanyu continued to look at her expressionlessly. Xiao Kezi twitched his mouth. Wu Ruame spoke with conviction. Ruame can also do it. Build an invincible and undefeatable female army for our great Song province. Ruame wants to go to Liu Pass. Ruame wants to fight bandits. Ruame wants to expel all the bastards who trample on our great Song province's territory. Duanyu glanced at her and said indifferently, Commandery Princess Wushuang of the Divine Province was at level 7 Divine Realm half a year ago. You break through to the Divine Realm first before discussing this matter. As if struck by lightning, Wu Ruame's face instantly crumbled. Your Majesty, left Prime Minister Wu Yong requests an audience. Us? Wu Ruame's small face fell even more, her eyes revealing the intention to run away. Let them in. A series of hurried footsteps approached from afar. Left Prime Minister Wu Yong hurriedly trotted over. Greetings, Your Majesty. Duanyu's lips curled as he looked at this chubby old man who was panting heavily. Take him away. Yes, yes. Thank you, Your Majesty. Thank you, Your Majesty. Wu Yong glared fiercely at Wu Ruame. If it weren't for the presence of others, he would have rushed forward and kicked his daughter. What a troublemaker. She was always causing trouble for her father. Ever since she was young, her unrealistic dream of being a heroine should have ended long ago. I really don't know what's going on in his head. He wants to be a hero all day long and wants to go to the battlefield. This is simply a little crazy. Go back with father. I'm not going back. I'm not going back. Wu Ruame hurriedly pounced over and grabbed the door. She looked at her father guardedly and said, I won't go meet that damn wastrel. The veins on Wu Yong's forehead throbbed as he glared at this daughter who was willfully causing trouble in the palace. He wished for nothing more than to kick this idiot to death. If it weren't for His Majesty's good temper, how could he tolerate her until now? I'd rather stay by His Majesty's side and continue to be a mid-court guard than go meet that damn wastrel. Prime Minister Wu was angered into laughter. Chapter 43:20. If you're a bodyguard, then who exactly is protecting who? His Majesty's hidden guards are all at the God Realm and above. Raise your strength to the threshold of the God Realm first. Wu Ruame only felt that her father's blunt words were heart-wrenching. Wu Ruame glared resentfully at her father and shouted angrily, Perhaps His Majesty doesn't dislike me? Very much. A cold and indifferent voice drifted over from the side. Everyone present snuck a peek at that person. His clothes that were comparable to the night sky accentuated his slender and tall figure. That pair of beautiful peach blossom eyes calmly accumulated a trace of alienation from beginning to end. Prime Minister Wu Yong, Xiao Kezi, Wu Ruame, was instantly petrified. She turned her head with a hopeless expression and stiffened her neck to glance at Duanyu. His Majesty was quite disdainful of her. I must break through to the God Realm within 3 months. Wu Ruame swore as she hugged the door frame. You said that half a year ago. Father Wu mercilessly exposed his daughter's boasting and pulled her up from the ground. Father, let go of me. Father. I won't leave. I won't leave. I want to protect His Majesty. I want to protect His Majesty. Gag her and take her away. Wu Yong was so angry that veins were popping on his forehead. He roared and had someone gag Wu Ruame's incessant mouth before dragging her away. This humble official will take his leave. Duanyu's unperturbed gaze brushed past the departing figures of the father and daughter, and he frowned slightly. Is everything ready? We've strictly selected 10,000 people from the secret pavilion and various camps. They've been waiting outside Tiger United's gate for a long time, Ing reported solemnly as he followed beside his master. Duanyu nodded absent-mindedly. These elite guards were to be sent to the River of Forgetfulness and handed over to Jojo, so they naturally had to be carefully selected. Most of these people were experts above the 12th level of the spiritual realm. After they went to the River of Forgetfulness and formed a team with the other 2 provinces, they would gather all the resources that could be gathered and forge them into the strongest team to deal with the Heavenly Fate Empire. In order to destroy such an inhumane organization like Tian Yun Group, sacrifices were inevitable. Half a year. There was only about half a year left for them to fully devote themselves to preparing this team. Because it was very likely that the heavenly fate would speed up the process and invade this peaceful world. Heir Rong has arrived, Your Majesty. Duan Yu paused and looked at the tall, moon-white figure that appeared outside the door of drooping flowers. Rong Qing's brows were picturesque, and her expression was calm. She looked straight ahead and bowed. Your Majesty. Duan Yu waved his hand and suddenly asked, Rong Qing, is it all right for us to bring people to the River of Forgetfulness? Crown Prince Rong shook his head with a serious expression. That's not appropriate. Now that the situation is still unstable, Your Majesty should consider traveling again in half a year. This great master had just ascended the throne. Although his methods were swift and decisive, he had also secretly dealt with many people. However, when a new emperor ascends the throne, the Great Song Prefecture is bound to be in chaos for a while. If the emperor left now, the capital city would be without a leader. Naturally, it would not be appropriate. Duan Yu harumphed and walked outside. What if we insist on going? This humble subject is willing to do it for you? Ha, who wants you to do it for me? Rong Qing followed behind him for a while. When she saw that he didn't speak, she couldn't resist saying, this subordinate can send a message to Your Majesty every day to report the River of Forgetfulness's situation. Also, I can inform Your Majesty about Miss Qiao's recent situation. Chapter 43-21. Duan Yu paused in his steps and glanced at Rong Qing, who was standing next to him. Who said we missed her? Vassal Prince Rong glanced at His Majesty aloofly and replied honestly, Your Majesty said it yourself. Nonsense. Why don't we remember saying that we missed her or something like that? Vassal Prince Rong muttered to himself for half a second before replying honestly. Although you didn't say it, your expression, actions, gaze, and even your breathing are telling this humble official that you want to go to the River of Forgetfulness. You really want to see the little miss. Duan Yu stepped away from him and silently broke into a stride. He really didn't want to talk to this kind of person who only knew how to retort his monarch. Annoying. Rong Qing expressionlessly followed after him. When the River of Forgetfulness sent people to negotiate, you were willing to send troops and form a team. You even volunteered to provide so many resources. Wasn't this your intention back then? He wanted to go to the River of Forgetfulness. He wanted to go to the River of Forgetfulness. He wanted to see Jojo. He really wanted to. Arbor rolled up from the floor and felt the soft hay beneath her. Only then did she remember that she came to the cargo hold to rest after finishing her porridge last night. She originally wanted to sleep in Paradise Planet, but her divine conscience had just recovered, and her connection with the star domain seemed to be intermittent. To avoid unnecessary complications, she laid down a mattress on the floor and made do with it. She didn't expect to sleep until late in the morning. When she pushed open the cargo hold door, she saw that the sun was shining brightly outside. It was already noon. This cargo hold was stuffy to sleep in. There were no windows on either side, so the airflow was obstructed. After a night, the smell inside was touching. In addition, the bed in the cabin wasn't as soft and comfortable as the one she slept in a few days ago. After waking up, Arbor only felt her waist and back ache. She used her small fist to pound her waist and back. When Arbor looked up, she saw Long Shengyun walking past her with a cold expression. "What are you doing?" The little stoic grumpily shouted at her. Long Shengyun turned around to glare at her. "What are you shouting for? Wash your hands and prepare to eat." Who on the ship wasn't at least in the spirit realm? Only Qing Hongsa, who had snuck onto the ship, had a slightly lower cultivation, but had at least broken through to the spirit realm. Yet now, each and every one of them was like a mortal, as though they had been poisoned by the little stoic's poison. They insisted on following her for all 3 meals. Let's eat, let's eat. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal carried a plate of stir-fried meat slices with green peppers and floated past her with a smile. Arbor looked up and saw that they had brought over a dozen tables from somewhere and put them together to make a long table. There was a sumptuous spread of food on the table. There were fruits, vegetables, and pastries. The little Stoic's eyes brightened, and she ran to the nearby bucket to wash her small hands. Then, like a wisp of smoke, she jogged to Emolyen's side and glanced at her beaming husband. Taking the bowl and chopsticks, Arbor pointed at the table curiously. "Where did you get so many tables? Also, this complete set of pots, bowls, ladles, and basins couldn't have been dug out from everyone's inner worlds and gathered together, right?" It turned out that this was what everyone thought. For example, Jojo would always bring some pots, bowls, ladles, basins, tables, chairs, stools, and the like with him when he went out, just in case he needed them. Jojo would bring everything he could and couldn't bring with him when he went out. "Ask Mayan." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal chuckled and pointed at the tables, chairs, stools, pots, bowls, plates, and cups. These and those were all provided by Sir Holy Sun.
Why?
Sir Jojo stuffed a piece of meat into his mouth and asked curiously. Chapter 43:22. Holy Sun Mi-yen coughed awkwardly and silently continued to eat, not planning to respond to the little Stoic's words. On the other hand, Emolyen glanced meaningfully at Mi-yen and unhurriedly picked up some vegetables for his wife. He chuckled softly and said, "Jojo, do you still remember that you took 1,000,000 spirit coins from the Holy Sun and rented him a room in the Imperial Academy's Winter Forest Court?" Holy Sun Mi-yen's mouth twitched. Arbor silently lowered his eyes and continued to eat the rice in his bowl, his small face deadpan and expressionless. On the other hand, the siblings Long Qian and Long Shangyun looked at Holy Sun Mi-yen with interest. Hearing His Highness the Crown Prince's tone, what, this Holy Sun Mi-yen was also swindled by the little girl back then. Holy Sun Mi-yen's expression was so strange. It looked like the swindling was a bit serious. Long Qian suddenly felt a sense of empathy for Sir Holy Sun. He glanced regretfully at the Holy Sun and nodded at him. Holy Sun, stupefied, all right? Was this young Master Long sick? Suddenly showing him such a caring gaze, it looked strange and curious. You gave him an empty room that had nothing. He had to pay 100,000 spirit coins for a bed, 50,000 for a stool, and 20,000 for a teacup. Don't you remember? Emolyen had a hard time holding back her laughter and asked his wife seriously. Arbor continued to eat rice and expressionlessly looked up at him. What does this have to do with what you want to talk about now? Uffed, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't resist laughing. My Jojo, don't tell me the connection. It's too big. Ever since you rented that 1,000,000 spirit coin earthen room for Mi-yen had lingering fears and brought tables, chairs, stools, pots, bowls, ladles, and basins with him every time he goes out. He has everything he needs for daily life. Uffed, cough, cough, cough. Ha! Youth from the Phoenix tribe was about to laugh, but was glared back by Holy Sun Mi-yen's stern gaze. Arbor made an "oh" sound and reached out to pick up some food nearby. It's a matter of the past. Let's not talk about it. It's all old history. Can't you just let it go? Why bring it up again? If he hadn't mentioned it, she would have forgotten about it. Did you bring your bed? She took 2 bites and suddenly turned around to ask Mi-yen. Mine was speechless.
I really don't want to talk to this guy.
What should I do? Jojo's section break. 10 days later in the evening. Long Huan stood in front of the ship's railing and pointed at the island in front of them. After drifting on the sea for so long, I'm sure everyone is exhausted. Let's land tonight and go to the fishing village ahead to rest for the night. This place is only 5 days away from the outer boundary of the River of Forgetfulness. Qing Hong Se could not help but frown and interrupt. What are you going to do in a small village like that? Why don't we hurry up and get to the River of Forgetfulness as soon as possible to rest? Long Qi was startled and reflexively turned to look at the little Stoic's reaction. What does younger cousin think? You can rest for a while. Arbor nodded calmly. She, Lien, Zhichun, and Mi-yen didn't have any problems. In any case, after night fell, they only needed to leave one person to stand guard outside while the others took turns to enter the star domain to rest. Everyone else, however, was extremely exhausted, especially the Phoenix tribe, those landlubbers. They weren't used to the long and bumpy journey on the sea in the first place. Although their cultivations weren't weak, it was still very tiring to be at sea for so many days. Now, their handsome and beautiful faces looked a bit sickly, making them look a bit pitiful. Chapter 43:23. Feng Changqing heaved a sigh of relief. After being on the boat for 10 days, he felt like his bones were about to fall apart. Arbor glanced at him and kindly took out a stack of ointment from his inner world and handed it to him. Stick it on and soak it in your bath at night. I guarantee that you'll be 100 times more energetic tomorrow. Thank you, holy lady. Feng Changqing bowed. Feng Zhongfei hurriedly ran to his elder brother and leaned his head over to see what was in his hand. After the boat docked, the group disembarked in a single file. When their feet touched the ground, they couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. It had been 10 days since devastating island sank, but there was still no news from Queen Qingyi. However, Qing Xuexue didn't show any signs of sadness. She only worked harder and harder every day. Because of her androphobia, Qing Xuexue was quite annoyed with the men of the Phoenix clan. Instead, she looked for Long Shangyun to spar with her spiritual techniques every day. As time passed, Qing Xuexue and Long Shangyun inexplicably became familiar with each other. Long Huan stepped on the soft sand beside the beach and said with a smile, "This fisherman's island is quite famous. Many adventure teams that go to our forgetful river Snow Ridge to train usually stay on this fisherman's island for a day or two to rest. So the business on this fisherman's island is usually very prosperous. Adventure teams can be seen everywhere on the island." As Long Huan introduced, his voice gradually lowered, and he looked around with a slightly strange expression. Why is it so quiet? The entire island was so quiet that one could feel some treacherous waves the moment they set foot on it. It was as if the entire island had sunk into a deathly silence. Even the chirping of birds and cicadas had completely disappeared. Long Shangyun and Qing Xuexue looked at each other. They both took 2 steps back and almost stepped into the sea behind them. "Didn't you say that this is a place where adventurers stay?" Qing Hongsa looked around vigilantly. "Why isn't there any sound at all?" Arbor raised his eyebrows and suddenly asked, "How can we prevent them from blocking our divine sense the moment we meet?" The sudden appearance of the mirror image array had locked her divine sense, so it was very difficult for her to move afterward. Therefore, Arbor wanted to know how to prevent trouble before it happened. If in the future, whenever she met someone from the heavenly fate realm, they would use this kind of spirit-locking formation on her. Wouldn't that be too much of a scam? Even we can't guard against such a soul-locking formation. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal shook his head and sighed. It's said that the River of Forgetfulness has a treasure called the Light Congealing Mirror. It can break the mirror image soul-locking array. Long Huan looked at him speechlessly, but his expression was very respectful. Senior Immortal, the Light Congealing Mirror is an item recorded in ancient books. Although we have heard about it since we were young, we have never seen it before. By the way, is there a place called Snow Ridge near the River of Forgetfulness? Yes, the holy land of Snow Ridge is undulating, and half of it surrounds our Sea of Forgetfulness. It's the most popular place for adventure teams to go. Long Yin nodded. Then do you know that there is a divine artifact master hiding under the snowy mountains? He has the heavenly forging cauldron, which is ranked 2nd in the world. Ah. Long Huan was surprised. Is it Senior Scattered Light? Scattered Light. Arbor murmured this person's name. He is a descendant of Xuanji? Long Huan's expression flickered. You know Ancestor Xuanji? Ancestor Xuanji? This time, it was Arbor's turn to be stunned. A thought flashed across his mind. Her surname is Long? Long Xuanji. Tomorrow, I will catch up on my sleep. Chapter 43:24. This divine artifact master, Mi Guang, should be one of the first-generation disciples of the Xuanji sect. A divine artifact master who lived under the forgetful river Snow Ridge all year round. She wondered if she would meet him on this trip. Arbor glanced at Long Qian hesitantly. Senior Xuanji, is it really your ancestor? Of course. Long Qian nodded and said seriously, Ancestor Xuanji is the most outstanding ancestor in the family. How could I joke about this matter? Cousin, you've heard about your ancestor? Long Qian's eyes flashed, and he could not help but size up Arbor. She had heard more than that. Arbor could not help but feel a little bitter when she thought of this. Could it be it was the power of the bloodline that attracted her to the Xuanji mystic realm to obtain the Xuanji core? Everything was guided by the bloodline. It was just like when she entered her mother's mystic realm and found her mother's remains. It was as if the heavens were guiding her. Although she was resentful towards the Forgetful River Dragon clan, she did not expect that she had already received the goodwill of the Forgetful River Dragon clan's ancestor before this. This made her feel rather conflicted. Should she let go of her feelings and not dwell on the past? Mo Lian was the clearest about the Xuanji core. Hence, he could clearly sense Jojo's emotions at this moment. Raising his hand to hold her small hand, Mo Lian said gently, let nature take its course. Why should she be so conflicted? In that case, Jojo was also a direct descendant of Senior Xuanji. It seemed that it was not entirely fate that allowed her to obtain the Xuanji core. No wonder when Senior Xuanji gave Jojo 3 missions in the Mystic Realm, he added that she should try her best to help those weak mermen. Long Xuanji and Long Qian were originally family. Arbor shook her head slightly and walked towards the Fisherman's Island.
Hey.
Long Shangyun suddenly tugged at her sleeve. This island is strange. Are we still going up? Yes, let's go and take a look. Arbor nodded and led the group towards the island. It was very quiet all around. Even the barking of dogs and the crowing of chickens could not be heard. Arbor's group of more than 400 people entered the fisherman's village one after another. However, they saw that the doors of every house were tightly shut. There was not even a trace of smoke in the village. Occasionally, they would see an emaciated woman sitting at the door. Before they could ask her anything, other people saw their large group pass by and immediately ran into the door in a panic, closing the door without saying a word. What's going on? Qing Hongse said unhappily, we're not ghosts. Is there a need to hide when you see us? Everyone ignored her and followed Xiaomu to the other end of the village without consulting her. Suddenly, Arbor and the others heard the sound of a door opening. They turned around and saw an elderly woman walking out of the door shakily with a cane. When she saw a group of people looking at her, she was so scared that her hand trembled and she hurriedly retreated. Unexpectedly, she was too hasty and tripped on the threshold. Just as she was about to fall to the ground, Arbor's figure flashed and his hand shot out like lightning to support her arm. Old Granny, don't panic. We're just passers-by. We won't hurt you. The old woman was slightly shocked. She looked up and saw Arbor's delicate little face. Her heart relaxed slightly. This child in front of her was really good-looking. He did not look like those ferocious people from before. Mo Lian ordered her people to rest on the spot. Then, she and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal walked over to Arbor and the old woman. They helped the old woman who had difficulty moving sit down. Arbor asked, what's going on with this village? Chapter 43:25. There's something you don't know. The old woman sat on a bench and said weakly, the people in the village were all frightened by those adventurers from outside. You also know that our Fisherman's Island is in the sea area of the River of Forgetfulness. Usually, there are people coming and going, but most of the teams that came to the River of Forgetfulness to train would come to our village to rest. Over time, every family started a business of inns and taverns. Arbor saw that the old woman's lips were dry and cracked, speaking intermittently. He reached out and took out a pot of tea, pouring a cup for her. The old woman's hand holding the teacup trembled slightly. She hurriedly took it and thanked him. The woman mentioned that the fresh water on Fisherman's Island was polluted. The people on the island had been forced to cut off water for several days. I don't know what happened at that time, but many of those adventurers from outside suddenly turned into zombies. A few dozen youths from our village, in order to save the entire village, led those Xiozha to the stone formation behind the village. The old woman couldn't help but cry when she spoke of this. Those children were all very young and very brave. They had clearly stepped onto a path of no return, but they still did it without hesitation. So, those mutated zombies are still in your village? The old woman nodded, right behind in the stone formation. Our ancestors have lived on this fisherman's island for generations. We only heard that the stone formation was built by a great Xiozha with unparalleled strength. Then why don't you leave this place? Qing Hongsa asked suspiciously. Since it was as the woman said, there were a large number of zombies in the village. Then why were these people still foolishly staying here and not running for their lives? Arbor said indifferently, if normal people want to leave, they naturally need a boat. Could it be that they could summon flying spirit beasts or use flying spirit tools? They didn't have any. Just now, on the way here, the village was filled with ordinary old and weak women and children. There were no boats leaving the island. Did they want these people to make a raft and float all the way to the river of forgetfulness? What a wild fantasy. Qing Hongse curled her lips awkwardly and turned her head to look elsewhere. She muttered softly, even so, we can't just stay on this island and wait for death. Humans were seeking to live, not to die. Just like her, didn't she escape from devastating City Island at the critical moment and beg for her life? You're not doing anything, yet you're expecting others to save you? These people were just lucky to encounter the little stoic before they ran out of food and water. Arbor raised his hand and patted the old woman's arm. Grandma, your village is still short of people. Gather everyone here. When we leave, we'll take you with us. Long Shengyun frowned. What do you want? Could it be that you want to bring these old, weak, women and children with you to the river of forgetfulness? Long Shengyun looked at Arbor as if she was looking at an idiot. This cousin. When did you become so kind-hearted? I don't see you treating your relatives well normally. Why are you even more affectionate with these strangers than with your own relatives? Arbor glanced at her and asked expressionlessly, is there a problem? If Arbor knew what Long Shengyun was thinking, he would definitely find her incredibly strange. Which eye did she see that she treated people affectionately? Chapter 43-26. This is a big problem. Long Shengyun rolled her eyes and could not help but say, what do you know? Not everyone can casually go to the river of forgetfulness. Mortals like these cannot enter our river of forgetfulness realm. Arbor looked up at her. The latter waved at her in exasperation. There's no use in saying so much. You will know when you go. Long Huan did not refute her sister this time. She nodded at Arbor and said, that is true. It is very difficult for mortals to enter the river of forgetfulness. Even if clan leader is lenient and agrees to give them a pass, these mortals still need a talisman to enter the river of forgetfulness with their physical conditions. Long Huan shrugged and said, it is very difficult to obtain. Long Shengyun nodded again. It is difficult enough for normal Xiozha to enter the river of forgetfulness. You still want to bring a group of mortals in? Impossible. It is as difficult as ascending to heaven. Arbor asked expressionlessly. What is so difficult about using the storage talisman to bring them in? Could they go into the water? Or could they not pass through the river of forgetfulness realm? They were all in the storage talisman. What other problems could there be? It was just an excuse. They did not want to accept these troublesome fishermen at all. Long Shengyun was speechless. She looked dazedly at her for a moment before saying in exasperation, in short, it is not possible. The old woman saw that they were about to quarrel and hurriedly advised from the side. Everyone, do not quarrel over this old woman and others. If we can get rid of those evil beings behind the island, maybe we can continue to survive on this island. The water source of your island has been destroyed. It is impossible to continue to stay here. Arbor looked seriously at the old woman. Do not worry. Go gather people first. Yes. The old woman stood up shakily. Arbor called and had Feng Zhongfei help the old woman to gather people. Long Shengyun glared angrily at the person in front of her. You are used to being a good person. Do you know that ever since the corpse poison spread in the sea and the living environment became worse, we have been forced to move to the south of the River of Forgetfulness? It is not easy for our clansmen to survive, and we have to take care of these troublesome mortals? What are you thinking? Shangyun. Long Huan tugged at her hand and turned to look at Arbor. Cousin, what Shangyun said is true. Furthermore, the River of Forgetfulness is indeed not suitable for ordinary humans to live in. You will understand once you go there. How about this, cousin? I'll send someone to send them out of the sea and settle down in a nearby city. But Long Huan glanced at Arbor and said, we need to leave this cargo ship to them. For the rest of the journey, I'll have to rely on my cousin's cough, Qi Xiao Zonglong. What do you think? Long Shangyun's eyes lit up as she looked at Arbor. She had had enough of this cargo ship. Her arms and thighs were so sore from sleeping last night that she felt like dying. He might as well sleep on the little stoic's bamboo couch. Not only was it clean and refreshing, but there was also a cotton quilt on top of it. He could pass the night comfortably and needn't worry about anything. That's right. Can we not charge for it? Long Shi asked weakly. When he saw Sir Jojo glance at him, he hastily added, or we can charge less. After all, they wanted to commandeer Sir Jojo's ship because they wanted to do a good deed. If they had to fork out their own money to rent Qi Xiao Zonglong, then they would be too innocent. Chapter 43:27. Long Shangyun glared at her brother. Her brother was becoming more and more obsequious in front of the stoic face. It was truly an eyesore. Arbor glanced at the siblings and looked up when she heard footsteps. She saw the elderly woman leading a group of about 70 to 80 old, weak women and children in front of them and saluting in unison. No need to be so courteous. Arbor nodded indifferently and turned to look at Long Qian, who was sneaking glances at her. Find a few more people to take them back and settle them down. Long Qian sighed in relief, and a happy expression appeared on his face. Okay. He had thought that his cousin was going to oppose him again and stubbornly take these people back to the River of Forgetfulness. He didn't expect her to be so easy to talk to and agree immediately. Cousin, don't worry. I will definitely take care of this matter properly. I will definitely take these people to the seaside city and settle them down properly. Arbor nodded expressionlessly. Perhaps it was because they were used to her expressionless attitude, but Long Qian and his sister didn't think much of it, so you'll get used to it after looking at it for a while, right? In the past, they might have thought that the damned stoic face was always stoic, as though someone owed her millions of spirit coins. They really wanted to tear off her stoic face and viciously stomp on it a few more times before giving it a good beating. But now they might think, oh, isn't it perfectly normal for a stoic face to always be stoic? Long Qian called over 4 or 5 strong men from the Dragon Clan and instructed them to take the old, weak, women, children, and the boatmen back with them. There was still a lot of food left on the ship, and it was all left for them. Calculating the time, these supplies would be enough when they returned to the seaside city. The old woman and the old, weak, women and children on the island originally thought that they were going to die here, but they didn't expect to see a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. They naturally thanked Arbor and the others profusely. Qing Hongsa couldn't help but mutter, if we leave all that food to them, what will we do in the future? Third sister, we cultivators won't starve to death even if we miss out on a few meals. Qing Hongsa was a little dissatisfied. Why did she have to pay for food in order to take care of a few strangers after she had fled so bitterly? That ship of supplies was prepared by the queen in advance, and it was given to an outsider for free. Arbor ignored her. This Qing Hongse, other than having a foul mouth and being selfish, didn't have much else. If she didn't pay attention to her, over time, this person would naturally shut her mouth. Besides, they had also used a lot of the supplies on the ship in the past 10 days. They were all ordinary living utensils, food, fruits, and the like. What was there to feel bad about? Previously, young Lord Long had spent a lot of money in sovereign capital to purchase high-grade goods from Kaidai Veranda and Precious Painting Workshop. She had stored them in a storage talisman without using them. What golden silk veil, fine satin quilt. It was just the right thing to use to spread out his crimson firmament blue wave boat and live a comfortable life. Do you want to take a look at the stone array at the back? To be honest, Longhorn was quite curious. What kind of powerful Xiozha could set up such a powerful stone formation behind the village? How could a mere stone array trap so many corpse puppets? Even Mo Lien felt that it was somewhat magical. If it was really useful, it would be a good idea to learn it. The young couple looked at each other, nodded, and walked towards the back of the village. Chapter 43:28. Everyone followed the young couple's footsteps and sprinted to the back of the village. When they saw it, they couldn't help but be stunned. There was an enormous stone formation in front of them. Each stone was so wide that it would take 3 people to wrap their arms around it, and more than 1.5 adults' height. These large stones seemed to have been moved here by unknown Xiozha from somewhere. They were abruptly erected in the empty space behind the village. One stone was separated by another. There were hollow patterns of various shapes and colors carved on them, and they looked slightly eerie. Arbor took a look and then looked away. The little guy who did not understand formations looked up at her husband. His brow was furrowed as he looked intently at the formation in front of him. He did not blink for a long time. Jojo Darren did not dare to disturb him. He stood next to him and carefully examined his expression. Xiao Qiao's lotus was usually very handsome. Now that he was serious, he looked even more handsome and beautiful, with an outstanding demeanor. Handsome, the little guy thought inside. Her little hand wanted to go and grab him, but stopped midway. When Mo Lien refocused, she saw the little guy's white hand that had retracted. She did not hesitate to reach out and grab it. Jojo, I found 2 life gates and know the essence of this formation. Let's go. Mo Lien excitedly grasped her little hand and pulled her into the stone formation. Pay attention to your steps. Don't mess up your steps. Mo Lien ordered and pulled Arbor into the stone formation. He Chun, Feng Chongqing and the others naturally followed without hesitation. Long Ji, Long Xiang Yun, Qing Xuexue, and the others hurriedly followed. Qing Hongsa hesitated for a while. Seeing everyone go in, she could only reluctantly follow. She couldn't be alone and not follow the group, right? If those people went out from another exit and left her on this deserted island, then wouldn't she be finished? Be careful. Arbor threw out a dozen defensive seals around everyone. There may be many corpse puppets here. Pay attention to your defenses. Yes. Everyone nodded warily and followed behind Mo Lien and Arbor. Apart from following them with full concentration, they also had a spare portion of their spiritual awareness to check if there were any approaching corpse puppets. Didn't the young adults on the Fisherman's Island trap the zombies of the adventurers in this stone array? Why haven't we found a single corpse along the way? Long Shangyun couldn't help but ask. Don't slack off, Arbor said calmly. Long Shangyun rolled her eyes. Suddenly, her pupils constricted as she saw a white figure pounce out from the side, heading straight for her neck. That thing's pale face, coupled with its distorted facial features, almost caused Long Shangyun to be distracted and vomit. When Long Shangyun saw that the corpse puppet had already arrived in front of her, she summoned her sword from her consciousness with a clang. When she killed the corpse puppet, she had just exhaled a breath of air when she suddenly froze. Countless strange white birds jumped out from the corpse puppet's exploded body. One of them opened its beak and tried to bite her arm. In the blink of an eye, a black gold arrow brushed past Long Shangyun's arm and instantly shot through the strange bird's neck. Everyone raised their swords to kill the white corpse birds that flew over. Suddenly, a milky white fog appeared in front of them, enveloping everyone in it in an instant. They couldn't even see their own fingers. Chapter 43:29. Jojo's Lotus? Arbor immediately reached out to grab the wrist of the man next to her. However, she was instantly displeased when she grabbed nothing but air. Where did Jojo's Lotus run off to in such a short time? Her footsteps were light, and she didn't panic as she walked through the layers of white mist. She casually released an arrow and disposed of a panting zombie. She inwardly thought, The zombies trapped in this stone's white mist formation seemed to be low-level creatures. It shouldn't be difficult for the foam tribe youths to deal with them, so there's no need to worry about them getting injured. Arbor closed her eyes and shot several zombies' heads in succession. As usual, she picked up the crystal cores on the ground and tossed them into her small pouch. These zombies didn't produce higher-level black crystals in their heads. It seemed that it was because they took different medicinal liquids. She could basically confirm now that people who took ordinary basic mutated medicinal liquids couldn't become high-level zombies even after they turned into zombies. If they wanted to become high-level level 2 zombies or above, they had to take mutated medicine. After taking it, the embryonic form of black crystals would probably gradually form in their heads, and the black crystals would become more and more solid after repeated improvements. She wondered how much superhuman's abilities would improve after absorbing this kind of black crystal. Arbor was a bit curious and secretly decided that after she cut open a piece of black crystal, she would test it out to see how much it could improve her psychokinesis. In any case, ever since she took the holy fruit, her body had become impervious to all poisons. A trifling corpse poison couldn't harm her at all. She had already developed antibodies against zombies, so even if she was scratched by a more powerful zombie, it couldn't harm her body in the slightest. A gust of wind came from behind her head. Xiao Mu didn't even look at it, directly shooting out a crow-gold arrow with a flick of her wrist. However, this time, she didn't hear the expected scream. The newcomer moved very quickly and continued to reach for the back of her neck. It was a living person. Arbor's lips revealed a grim smile. She covered her hand with a Vajra talisman and grabbed the other person's wrist with a flip of her wrist. The newcomer was shocked and hastily dodged. Unfortunately, it was already too late. When this little stoic's ice-cold hand tightly clasped his wrist, the newcomer felt unwell all over, especially when he heard a soft, crack sound in the silent air. As the fear in his heart spread, large beads of sweat involuntarily fell from his forehead. His wrist, was broken by the stoic face just like that. "Show me your true face." A strong beam of light shone on the person's half-dark and half-gloomy face. Arbor sneered, the 5 vines between his fingers darting towards his opponent's throat like snakes. It was as fast as lightning and as strong as the wind, causing the other party to break out in a cold sweat. Holding his broken wrist, he quickly retreated. Arbor chased after him with a sneer in his eyes. "Luring the enemy in? You still want to trick Joe? Who is it that was so stupid to impatiently make a move?" This method of doing things was not at all like Mu Qingya's brilliant method of calmly waiting for the right opportunity. Which scoundrel was it that hit his head but showed his tail? He didn't realize he was being funny at all.
Rip.
A spirit-binding rope abruptly landed on Arbor's body and tightly wrapped around him 7 or 8 times. The other end of the rope was held by the person with the broken wrist. Right now, he was looking at her with a smug expression, as if victory was already in his grasp. Chapter 43:30. Arbor could clearly see this person's face hidden behind the stone array, half in light and half in shadow. It was a very delicate face, but at this time, because of the pain, that face had long been distorted into a rather ugly appearance. She had seen this face not long ago. It was the person who had given her a trace of a nightmare from her previous life in Sheng Zhouei's battle arena the moment they met. Zhouei Academy's Buyi? The one who followed beside Li Xiangbei. Arbor hooked her lips. What? Has Tianyun set his sights on Zhouei Academy again? Tianyun had sent people everywhere to hide in aristocratic academies to search for more talents for his organization to test medicine, right? Buyi clutched his broken left wrist, looking coldly at Arbor, and said fiercely, "Arbor, I've been waiting for you for a long time." The grudge between the two of them had grown big. Originally, 2 fingers on his hand had been broken by the Crown Prince's people because of this woman. Now that his entire wrist was broken, new and old grudges added together, it really made one abnormally angry. "Waiting for me?" Arbor looked up at his incomparably loathsome face. "Where does your confidence come from?" Buyi snorted coldly, shaking the spirit-binding rope in his hand. "This is not an ordinary spirit-binding rope. It's more than enough to bind a divine realm cultivator like you. Are you sure? Arbor stared coldly at the other. The slender fingers stuck to her side moved slightly, and instantly felt the spirit-binding ropes binding on her body gradually tighten. Buyi snorted lightly. I said don't waste your energy. You can't escape. Let me think. How should I take you away? Is it more convenient to let you fall asleep, or to just break your legs? Arbor's cold eyes looked directly at the other. Her lips curled slightly, and a mocking sneer appeared.
Humph.
I think you won't shed tears until you see the coffin. Buyi was directly angered by her disdainful gaze, and an arc of light in his hand swept towards Arbor's knees. Arbor's eyes gradually turned cold. His limbs were tied up, and he couldn't move his body. He felt as if something heavy was dragging him. Several defensive talismans appeared in front of him, and the power of the talisman enveloped his body, blocking the sword of Bai in time. Startled Swan jumped out, and with a buzzing sound, it cut open the spirit-binding rope on her body. In just a few seconds, Arbor had already broken free. His figure leaped forward, and the startled swan dagger shone with a sharp aurora. It was cold and sharp like a line of snow, and it instantly cut open the clothes on Bai's chest. The man lowered his head and saw that his clothes were wide open. There was a torn wound on his skin, and blood was flowing down. What a sharp dagger! Bai took a deep breath and suddenly felt very annoyed. He didn't expect that after just a few rounds, he would be injured by this woman again and again. Now, even the spirit-binding rope couldn't bind her? Therefore, this dagger of hers must be an unstoppable divine artifact. Damn it! Bai's eyes darkened, and a layer of divine armor covered his upper body. The long sword in his hand was also covered with ice crystals, and he suddenly swung the dagger in front of him. He spun around and kicked, and Bai flew into the air. The sword in his hand exploded, and he still slashed towards the little girl's legs.
Of course, he didn't want her to die.
He wanted her to live a life worse than death. Arbor looked coldly at the incoming sword light, and summoned the Thunder Sword to meet it head-on. Suddenly, she heard a flutter of clothes, and Mo Lian's cold, handsome face instantly blocked in front of her, and he summoned the Black Moon with a backhand. A long cry cut through the air, and the dark sword light of the Black Moon blocked Bai's fierce attack. Chapter 43-31. How did this person get here so quickly? Buyi was shocked, and his gaze flickered. This stone array had been modified by the array formation master he had brought with him, who had added some new things. He sneaked onto Fisherman's Island with his men without informing anyone, all for the sake of silently waiting there. After waiting here for 2 days, he had the formation master reinforce the stone formation. That was why the zombies could not escape. Otherwise, how could the original formation trap the zombies for so long? Once the stone formation was broken, the zombies should have rushed out to tear the remaining people in the village to pieces and eat them. So how could Prince Mo find this place so quickly? This formation had been modified by the formation master. Unless he was very familiar with the operation of this formation, it was impossible before he could continue hesitating. The Crown Prince's sword gleam caught up to him like lightning. Buyi was shocked. As he retreated quickly, he threw out a round bead. The moment it exploded, smoke filled the air. His figure disappeared into the smoke. He clutched his aching left wrist and panted heavily. That damned Mo Lian. How did he get here so quickly? Didn't this array formation completely isolate many of them from the outside world? How could it be? Whoosh! A bright light broke through the heavy fog in front of him. It was like a scorching sun illuminating the space. An arc of sword gleam chased after Buyi. Buyi's eyes bulged. He was shocked. He bounced and rolled backward. He dodged a few times and avoided most of the sword gleam. However, he felt a chill on his shoulder. Lowering his head, he saw that blood was flowing out of his body. He had received another sword strike on his shoulder. Pain assaulted his heart. Buyi was shocked. He looked up slightly and saw a slender figure holding a little girl's hand. They suddenly appeared not far away. they caught up again? Buyei's current emotions were not just fear and uneasiness. He felt a strong sense of defeat. This kind of formation that covered the sky and waited for people to walk into a trap. However, it felt like catching a turtle in a jar. It made him feel powerless. A feeling that Emolien, this person, seemed to be undefeatable even rose from the bottom of her heart. Lord Jojo waved away the thick fog in front of his eyes. With one hand holding the Crown Prince's hand, he quickly passed through the fog formation. At a glance, he saw the ashen-faced Bai. Buyei suddenly raised his hands and shouted, "Grandmaster Chu, change the formation." As soon as he finished speaking, he quickly disappeared into the stone formation behind him to the left. Emolien tightened her grip on Arbor. She looked coldly at the changing scenery in front of her. The original stone formation was suddenly filled with black chi. Ghostly wails and howls could be heard everywhere. It was as if the place in front of them had suddenly turned into a desert in hell. Countless ghostly hands passed through the thick fog and grabbed at the two of them. Emolien pulled the little fellow into her arms and single-handedly controlled the Black Moon's sword to cut through the thick fog and cut off a claw. Seeing countless zombies pouncing at him from all directions, he swiftly lifted the little stoic up, allowing her to soar into the air. His movements were extremely fast as he leaped into the dense black ghost hand formation. His sword gleam filled the air, and holy power lingered around him. The little stoic looked down from midair and saw him moving gracefully, like a startled swan and a swimming dragon. His figure shuttled through the dense black chi formation. Wherever his sword gleam went, it was as if it could split mountains, split seas, and split stars. Black chi scattered in all directions, and the ghostly wails and howls transformed into waves of tragic howls. Wherever the Black Moon's sword gleam passed, it exterminated a swath of evil beings. It was so fast that it was dazzling. Chapter 43:32. In just a moment, the fog array was swept away by the Crown Prince's tyrannical power. The stone array crumbled into pieces, and the sound of explosions could be heard everywhere. Sir Jojo landed on the ground expressionlessly. Before he could steady himself, he was pulled into Prince Mo's arms again. He looked her up and down. Is something the matter? What could happen to her? She didn't even lift 2 fingers from beginning to end. If something happened, it must be because she was too bored. Emolien lowered his head and smiled at her. He patted her back. Don't be afraid. Arbor couldn't help but look down and roll his eyes. He didn't know which eye of his husband saw that she was afraid. Sir Jojo's gaze focused on a place under his feet. He raised his hand and pointed. Chase. Okay. Emolien nodded. He turned to look at the center of the stone array. There was a big hole. This should be the underground passage to the beach. Arbor frowned slightly. We can't let that person escape. He can't escape. Emolien didn't pull his wife down to chase after him. He just reached out his hand and pushed gently. A black fire that seemed to have a spirit instantly came out of his palm and chased into the hole. It chased deep underground at an extremely fast speed. Let's go. Emolien held his wife's small hand and squeezed it gently. This spy must have something to rely on if he dared to come here and cause trouble so presumptuously. Who did he think a broken array could trap? The Crown Prince's eyes were cold. He picked up his wife and swayed lightly. A hole suddenly appeared in the void in front of them. The two of them disappeared without a trace. On the other side, Bai and his group were like stray dogs as they passed through the secret underground passage. The dozens of Heavenly Fate disciples behind them screamed in horror. They scrambled out of the secret passage with Bai's deputy hall master. Those who were slow were immediately devoured by the spiritual black fire behind them. Buyei's pupils constricted as he watched the disciples turn into a pile of ashes under the burning of the black fire. The black fire spread instantly. The disciples of the Heavenly Fate sect retreated in fear. Suddenly, 2 flying swords pierced through the clouds and the moon, flying straight to Buyei. The latter hurriedly swung his sword to block one of the swords and pulled a heavenly fate disciple in front of him. The sword pierced through the disciple's heart with a soft sound. The latter did not even have the chance to make a sound before he died, and was immediately used as a scapegoat. The long sword that had pierced into the chest of the unlucky bastard made a soft, clang sound. Suddenly, the sword was lifted and flew backwards. Bouilly raised his head, his pupils constricting. The sword fell into the hands of a smiling man dressed in red. It was the venerable immortal by Mo Lien's side. They came so quickly. Bouilly subconsciously took a step back. His eyes narrowed as he tightened his grip on the sword in his hand. Vice Hall Master. A heavenly fate disciple beside him looked at him in surprise. Bai turned his head and nodded slightly at him. The heavenly fate disciple took out something from his inner world and threw it into the air. A flying spiritual artifact suddenly formed. Bouilly was the first to escape. He had just leaped into the air when he saw a green vine wrap around his feet. The vines grew rapidly, and in a flash, they wrapped around Bai's arms and shoulders, tying him up from head to toe. The venerable peach blossom immortal chuckled. He guided a wisp of wood spirit with his fingertips. With a slight tug, Bouilly was pulled down from the air. Chapter 43:33. Brother, where do you want to go? Vice Hall Master. Vice Hall Master. Bai shook his bound body and glared at the venerable peach blossom immortal and holy sun Mi Yen with fiery eyes. Vice Hall Master? The venerable peach blossom immortal sized up the person in front of him. What makes you think you can really catch a rabbit by waiting for a rabbit by a tree stump? Perhaps what you catch just so happens to be a tiger or a wolf. Ripping waves came from the air. Bai's eyes flickered. He looked up and saw a slender palm appear out of thin air in front of him. In the blink of an eye, Prince Mo passed through the air with the little stoic in his arms and landed in front of everyone. His phoenix eyes stared icily at Bai. In that instant, Bai felt like he was being targeted by a ferocious beast, and he felt unwell. Breaking through the air and coming out. The power to annihilate nothingness. The crown prince of the divine province actually had such terrifying power? Why didn't anyone in the entire Tianyan sect mention this before? How many times had they interacted with the crown prince? There was no way they didn't know that the crown prince had such a powerful and unique ability. Sir Jojo expressionlessly looked at the person in front of him and patted Prince Mo's neck, indicating for him to put him down. Mo Lien looked at her in amusement before loosening his grip and letting her go. Arbor slowly walked to Bai with a cold expression. He drew out a clap of thunder and slowly aimed it at the other party. You're allowed to leave behind your last words. Feng Chongqing and the others found Long Qian, Long Shangyun, and Qing Xuexiue in the shattered stone formation. They had just rushed over when they heard the little stoic say this coldly. You're allowed to leave behind your last words. You're allowed to leave behind your last words. Why the heck did he feel that this icy little stoic was a bit inexplicably adorable? You dare to kill me? Bai couldn't resist sneering. Do you know the consequences of killing me? Since you don't have any last words, then die. Arbor pointed, and the clap of thunder whistled through the air and shot toward Bai's neck without hesitation. Bai stared in shock at the person in front of him. He probably didn't expect this stoic face to be so resolute and kill him without a second word. In reality, the little stoic's current state of mind wasn't very calm either. When she looked at the person in front of her, there was a voice in her heart that kept telling her, "Enemy, enemy, kill him. Don't talk nonsense with him. Kill him immediately." Although he wanted to figure out some things in his heart, for example, did he really have any interactions with Bai in his previous life? For example, did something happen between him and this person in his previous life? But at this moment, when she was truly facing this person, she really didn't want to ask or care about anything. She just wanted to get rid of this big trouble. Chi, with a soft sound, a flying sword suddenly drilled out in front of Bai and quickly split apart Arbor's thunder sword. Sudden thunder shook and was summoned back to Arbor's hand, clasping it between his fingers. She leaped into the air, ice crystals and water spirits emerging from her hands. They rustled like flying blades as they rushed towards Bui. Wait, stop. Bui suddenly realized that the stoic face in front of him wasn't joking with him. She really wanted to kill him. So when she asked him if he had any last words, it really was the truth and not a joke like other people. What right do you have to tell me to stop? Arbor glanced at him coldly. Although she didn't say anything, Bui could clearly read the deep meaning in her cold eyes. Chapter 43-34. Don't you want to know who the mastermind behind Tianyan is? Arbor's eyes were mocking, and her lips curled. You know? Of course I know. Arbor stared icily at her, her entire body's water spiritual energy ready to be unleashed. Everyone saw a waterfall-like water curtain slowly rise behind her, which instantly solidified into an ice surface resembling an iron plate. Long Shangyun's gaze flickered, and a thought spun in her mind. The little stoic's control over the power of the five spirits had probably already reached the pinnacle of perfection. Someone about to die is merely spouting nonsense. Arbor raised her sword, and a rainbow-like sword light rapidly cut through the ice wall behind her. In less than a moment, everyone saw the ice surface crumble and transform into countless sharp ice spikes aimed directly at Bui. Buye's entire body was bound by the vines guided by the venerable peach blossom immortal, and he simply couldn't struggle free. When he saw the little stoic pointing countless ice spikes at him like an arrow on a bowstring, he instantly started to panic. I know, I can tell you, but you must. Before Bui could finish speaking, he saw the stoic face wave her hand, and countless ice spikes abruptly stabbed at him from head to toe. Bui struggled and jumped back in a panic. He used his divine perception to guide his flying sword and slashed several ice spikes back and forth in front of him. However, he quickly discovered that there was practically no end to those ice spikes. Countless densely packed ice spikes gathered in one place and directly nailed his flying sword to the ground. The remaining hundreds to thousands of ice spikes were like locusts passing through, swarming through his limbs and bones with clanging sounds. Buye's entire body was corroded by the cold air, and he was rooted to the spot in a daze. Everyone clearly saw the berserk power of the sacred water scuttling back and forth in his body, wantonly destroying his dantian and meridians. In a flash, the cold air spread from Buye's hair to his eyebrows, eyes, nose, and mouth, all the way down to the soles of his feet. Within minutes, his entire person turned into a transparent crystal-like ice sculpture. The fear in his eyes could still be seen through the ice. His mouth was slightly agape, and his eyeballs were bulging out of their sockets. The panicked expression on his face was completely exposed. Damn liar. Arbor looked at him coldly. A mere vice hall master of a small branch of the Heavenly Fate organization dared to claim that he knew who the mastermind behind the Heavenly Fate organization was? You want to lie to Jojo again? You're spouting too much nonsense. Go to hell. Arbor stretched out his hand and clenched his fist. In a split second, the ice sculpture with its mouth slightly open suddenly broke apart into 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 pieces and fell to the ground. Long Shangyun's pupils shrank. Qing Heis, who was behind him, sucked in a breath of cold air and took a few steps back. When she raised her eyes again, she looked at Arbor with a hint of fear in her eyes. Arbor was a little too frightening. Tearing a person into pieces just because of a disagreement, wasn't this method a bit too terrifying? Qing Shueshue turned back to look at Qing Hongsa. She frowned and couldn't help but sneer. Third sister, you can't be thinking that this person is pitiful, right? He's a disciple of the Heavenly Fate organization who doesn't shrink from any evil. Wasn't this third sister too naive? At this time, could it be that the long-lost Virgin Mary heart was acting up? Don't look at this Vice Hall Master Buyi in front of her. His face was very delicate and he seemed harmless. But as the Vice Hall Master of the Heavenly Fate organization, what good could he do on a daily basis? How many people had died at the hands of the Heavenly Fate organization? Chapter 43-35. Furthermore, not long ago, their entire devastating island had collapsed and sunk to the bottom of the sea because of Tianyun's attack. Deep hatred was right in front of them. What kind of expression was third sister's? She actually acted up at this time. It was truly laughable. Qing Hongsa also seemed to feel that her expression just now was a little too much. She hurriedly restrained her expression and said stubbornly, "I don't sympathize with Tianyun's people." Qing Shueshue glanced at her again and faintly lowered her eyes. Third sister. The moment Tianyun wiped out our home, the hatred between us and them became irreconcilable. Seeing that the surrounding air was quiet and no one spoke, Long Qinglong couldn't help but laugh. Long Huan could not help but clear his throat, then chuckled awkwardly and said, "Just now, our brothers from the Phoenix clan have cleaned up all the corpse puppets in the stone formation. We've already checked the surroundings. There are no more corpse puppets left." Long Shangyun said, "Since that's the case, let's leave now. Hurry up and let her board the Crimson Firmament Blue Wave ship to take a comfortable bath and sleep." She really didn't want to move a single finger. Just now, she had killed so many corpse puppets in Stone Town that her hands were almost sore. She originally wanted to rest on the island, but in the end, she had to fight again. How tiring. Long Qing also nodded, but quietly glanced at Sir Jojo and said, although this place has already become an abandoned, deserted island, everyone is also very tired after fighting for so long. In my opinion, why don't we return to the village and find a slightly cleaner house to stay for the night and rest? We'll set off tomorrow morning. They originally came to this island to rest. Now that they came up and fought, not only did they not rest, they were even more tired. Big brother, you. Long Shangyun looked at Long Qing strangely. When did Big Brother become so silly and adorable? Wasn't it better to rest on the Crimson Firmament Blue Wave? The Crimson Firmament Blue Wave ship moved steadily, as if it was on flat land. It didn't make people feel bumpy at all. The space on the ship was different. There were many rooms. Just randomly picking one would be very comfortable. This? Why did they have to find a place to stay on this lousy island? Wasn't this superfluous? Arbor turned around and looked at everyone's pale faces. His gaze shifted to young Master Long's travel-worn face. "Go rest on the red firmament blue waves." She glanced at him and said expressionlessly, "I won't charge you." Young Master Long heaved a sigh of relief, as though he had been granted amnesty. His eyes revealed traces of a smile as he cupped his hands towards Arbor and thanked her. "Many thanks for cousin's generosity. What were they waiting for? Let's set off quickly." Long Shangyun. Damn. So Big Brother was retreating in order to advance. Damn. She was wondering why Big Brother was so stupid. It turned out that he had learned to be smart. Qing Hongsa tugged on Qing Shueshue's sleeve. "Shueshue, what are they talking about? What scarlet firmament blue waves? Where are they going to rest? Why did the Long siblings look so happy and excited?" Arbor took out the sealing ball from his inner world and casually tossed it to the sea. Everyone saw a 3-story ship riding the wind and breaking the waves as it sailed down the river, creating a series of huge waves. The entire ship sank several feet into the sea and came to a steady stop. "Let's go." Long Shangyun waved at Qing Shueshue excitedly. Following Arbor and the others, they flew towards the Crimson Firmament Blue Wave. Great, they finally got rid of that lousy ship. They didn't have to sleep on the ground and on haystacks every day. Their backs were sore from sleeping. Yo, the future was promising. Chapter 43-36. This night had been too comfortable. After being tossed about on the dilapidated ship for so many days and suddenly returning to a sacred weapon like the Crimson Firmament Blue Wave, she suddenly felt that this treatment and benefits simply couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as before. After a good night's sleep, Long Shangyun walked up to the deck to breathe in the fresh air and couldn't resist stretching. When she turned around, she saw 2 tall and handsome men, one in red and one in white, walking down the spiral staircase. For a moment, she felt that nothing in the world was more beautiful than this. The man in red leaned against the railing and chuckled with a wine pot in his hand. The man in white was like a holy light shining on all things, and his expression was aloof. As the two people's eyes swirled, it was as if a myriad of afterlights were flowing down. The myriad colors in the world were all gathered around this damn stoic. Long Xiangyun took a bite of the dried bun in her hand. Her nose twitched, and she smelled the fragrance of clear porridge. She walked forward without stopping and hastily followed the scent. Then, she saw an expressionless face in a moon-white robe appear in front of her. "What are you doing?" As expected, the little stoic immediately hollered at her. Long Xiangyun speechlessly rolled her eyes, but her gaze followed the large pot of porridge in the little stoic's hand. "Washing my hands." The little stoic glanced at her disdainfully and walked past her. Long Xiangyun turned around and bared her teeth at the little stoic's back. "This damn stoic. Can't you speak properly?" Before long, the 100 members of the Feng tribe and Qing Xueshue's 300 personal guards all came out. Everyone suddenly realized that this space was truly very interesting. This deck didn't look very big, but it didn't feel crowded even with more than 400 people squeezed together. The surroundings were still empty. "We'll see the snowy ridge if we continue forward," Long Huan said to Arbor with a smile. "Cousin, are you going to look for senior fine light of the snowy ridge sacred land now?" Arbor shook her head. "Let nature take its course." She had already given the remaining nameplates of the Xuanji school's first-generation disciples to seniors Chun Qi and Lu Zheng. Without nameplates, it would be troublesome. In any case, this matter wasn't urgent. It had been so many years, so why be impatient? "All right, then let's not stay here any longer and enter the river of forgetfulness directly." Long Huan sighed. "Speaking of which, we've wasted quite a bit of time on this journey." Xiao Mu glanced back slightly and calmly glanced at him before retracting her gaze. "Cousin, don't worry. The River of Forgetfulness Dragon Clan has no ill intentions towards you," Long Huan hurriedly said. "Besides, Grandmother really wants to meet you." Arbor didn't say anything. He put down the bowl of porridge, got up, and walked to the railing. Crown Prince Emo faintly swept Long Huan a glance. Seriously, Long Huan could sense the dense warning in the Crown Prince's eyes even through the air. He had seen a lot along the way. For someone like the Crown Prince who loved his wife as much as his life, if the Dragon Clan of Wangchuan really did anything harmful to the little stoic, the Crown Prince would probably uproot the entire Wangchuan. Between the two of them, there was no need to say anything, but everything was expressed in silence. It was truly worthy of envy. Long Huan shook his head slightly and calmly looked back at the Crown Prince, nodding at him. Emolian glanced at him before retracting his gaze and walking towards his wife's side. If Long Huan could behave himself, he naturally wouldn't touch their family. If the River of Forgetfulness Dragon Clan had ulterior motives and wanted to harm his Qiao, how could he treat them courteously? He naturally had to protect his wife to the end. Chapter 43-37. On the vast sea, a fast ship was heading towards the depths of the River of Forgetfulness. The ship had been circling around the snowy mountains for many days, but it still hadn't found the place where the people of the River of Forgetfulness lived. What's going on? There's no island here. Could it be that the River of Forgetfulness Dragon Clan and their clansmen are all gathered in the snowy mountains? After searching for a few days without finding the entrance, he was already very impatient. Mu Rochuan stood on the deck and looked at the sea in the distance, not saying anything for a long time. "Eldest miss, what do you think?" He sighed and suppressed her temper to ask. After interacting with this eldest miss for a while, he realized that this eldest miss's personality was too stuffy. Basically, if she didn't ask her or talk to her, she could be stuffy for a few days without making a sound. Of course, he didn't know that this dull eldest miss used to be in high spirits and was quite confident in her eloquence. If Mu Rochuan stood in front of Mu Xingchen and Arbor now, the two siblings would probably be shocked. Her change was too great. Eldest Mississippi, Hong Chang led the two of them over and cupped his hands slightly towards Mu Rochuan. After interacting with her for a while, Hong Chang was somewhat convinced by this eldest Mississippi. At first, he both felt that this eldest miss with no cultivation was simply causing trouble here. But gradually, they also realized that this unusually calm eldest miss was very much like their hall master. Her intelligence was also not below that of their hall master. "How is it?" Mu Rochuan asked softly. "Deputy Hall Master Bai has brought people to Fisherman's Island for many days. Normally, they should be back by now, but Mu Rochuan couldn't help but sneer. Just send a message back and ask the people in the main hall to take a look at their life lanterns." Hong Chang was stunned and said with a solemn expression, "Eldest Miss means that Bai and the others are already dead. Isn't this a very normal thing?" Mu Rochuan said indifferently, "Before you attacked them, did you ever find out how many deity realm experts and transcendent realm experts there were by Mu Qiao's side? I really admire Deputy Hall Master Bai's courage. But at the same time, I'm also worried about his intelligence." Mu Rochuan faintly said, "He does whatever his master tells him to do. What a brainless dog." Although I don't know how the Hall Master of the Hidden Moon Hall came to have enmity with Mu Qiao, but he's so naive. I feel that he's not qualified to be the master of the Hidden Moon Hall. "Young miss, please be careful with your words." Hong Chang hurriedly bowed and said, "Within Tianyuan, there was a very strict hierarchy. As a subordinate, he was not allowed to talk about whether his superior was right or wrong. This was absolutely unacceptable." Mu Rochuan shut her mouth with a cold expression. She turned her head and continued to look at the distant sea. "I'll send a message to the main hall right away," Hong Chang added, then left with his men. He glanced at him, frowned, and said to Mu Rochuan, "Eldest Miss, the most important thing for us now is to find the entrance to the River of Forgetfulness. As for other matters, we can put them aside for now." Although Deputy Hall Master Bai's death was regrettable, it was not the most important thing at the moment. "Enter the River of Forgetfulness." Mu Rochuan's face revealed a mysterious smile. "Isn't the River of Forgetfulness already there?" Chapter 43-38. But even though this place is within the boundaries of the River of Forgetfulness, if we go in, he suddenly stopped speaking. Her gaze changed slightly as she looked towards Mu Roxian. The latter's gaze remained fixed on the calm sea, not moving at all. He was a smart person. With a flash of insight, she couldn't help but exclaim, "Eldest Miss, you mean that the entrance to the River of Forgetfulness is here? Are there any cultivators below the spirit realm here? If so, please step out. Those below spirit realm do not have any protection, and it is very difficult to enter the River of Forgetfulness, Jia." On the deck of the boat, Long Qian asked. His voice was very calm and did not show any disdain.
He was just stating a fact.
Everyone looked at each other. No one moved at all. It seemed that Qing Shueshue's 300 personal guards were all above spirit realm.
"All right."
Long Qian nodded. "How many people here cultivate water spirit? Please stand to the left." Immediately, many people walked to the left side and looked in Long Huan's direction. Those who cultivate water spirit, even if they cannot cultivate a water spirit barrier, they can use a water barrier to block off the water when they enter, Long Qian said with a serious expression. "I only have 100 water avoidance pearls here. Distribute them to those who need them." Long Qian took out the water avoidance pearls from his inner world and gave them to his personal guards. Mainly those who cultivate fire spirit and lightning spirit need them. "Put the water avoidance pearls in your mouth. Your fire spirit defense and lightning spirit defense are completely useless in the water. Especially lightning spirit. Be careful that the defense is useless and you will die from the electricity flowing through the water." Everyone's mouths twitched as they looked silently at the lightning spirit Xiuzha. The latter looked at each other with pale faces. "So? The entrance to the River of Forgetfulness is under the sea?" Feng Zhongfei ran to the railing and looked down at the calm sea. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Do we have to dive into the deep sea?"
"Yes."
Long Qian nodded. "So, without a water spirit barrier, It is very hard to dive into the deep sea. The distance is very deep. It will take about 2 hours. So, if everyone has defensive Ling artifacts, you can continue to prepare. Remember to bring enough medicine and replenish your spiritual energy at all times. After all, activating a defensive spiritual artifact also consumed spiritual energy. As for Mo Lian, He Chun, Holy Sun Mi Yen, these transcendent realm experts, Long Huan naturally did not need to worry too much. With his sane energy, even if he were to dive for a few days and nights, it would not be much of a problem. Sir Jojo moved his hands and feet. He looked down at the calm sea and looked at Long Hua with a questioning gaze. Shall we? Long Yin nodded. Everyone follow behind us. Be careful.
Hua.
Long Shi and Long Shangyin looked at each other, and both of them transformed their fishtails and dove into the water. Hua hua. The sound of people jumping into the water rang out one after another. Everyone jumped into the sea with all their might and sank into the waves with their heads covered. Spiritual energy barriers of various colors slowly lit up around their bodies, wrapping around them.
Splash.
Arbor sank into the water as if it had returned to its mother's embrace. He stretched his limbs with a comfortable expression, and with a casual movement, his body shot out a distance. Feng Zhongqing and the others who followed her into the water suddenly widened their eyes in surprise. Everyone looked back and saw that the little girl was like a flexible fish, swimming away with the current in instant emotion. Wife, come back. Chapter 4339. Wife, hurry up and come back. Why was she so nimble like a fish once she entered the water? Even the Dragon Clan clansmen who had fishtails to assist them in paddling weren't like his wife, who could swim such a long distance in an instant. She kicked her legs twice, as if she was about to completely disappear from his sight. Seeing that his wife was getting further and further away from him, this fellow couldn't help but feel anxious. He hurriedly transmitted his voice to Sir Jojo in the water. Wife, hurry and come back. The heavens truly took pity on them. With his and Hu Jinshan's cultivation, they actually couldn't catch up to Sir Jojo in the water. They could only watch helplessly as she dashed out. Yes, she was dashing. How was his Jojo swimming in the water? She was simply kicking her legs and dashing forward for a long distance, as if she was walking on flat ground. How could Sir Jojo know that once she entered the water, she was like a runaway wild horse, dashing out for a long distance? When she heard her husband's voice transmission, she turned her head and looked dumbfoundedly at Mo Lian and the others who were far away from her. Why was her husband so far away from her? Why were they dawdling like this? Why weren't they hurrying to catch up? Didn't they say that the entrance to the River of Forgetfulness was underwater? What were Long Ji and Long Shongyun doing? Why were they dawdling behind? Why weren't they leading the way? Countless questions rapidly popped up in Sir Jojo's head, but she promptly swept them out of her mind. Husband, Jojo is coming. The little stoic hastily kicked her legs and dashed back to Mo Lian, Hu Jinshan, and the others. Splash, 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 splash. Everyone could see clearly now. This stoic girl casually kicked her legs in the water and dashed over 100 feet like an arrow. In less than a few seconds, she had already turned back. Long Shongyun's eyes bulged in shock. Her long, gliding fishtail stood upright in the water as she turned to look at her brother, who had an equally astonished expression. The little stoic's paddling speed is clearly superior to the fastest and strongest divers among the merfolk. The siblings exchanged a glance and criticized in their hearts at the same time. Husband, why are you so slow? Mr. Jojo quickly returned to Mo Lian's side. He reached out and hooked his arm around Mo Lian's arm. He looked at him from head to toe. Did something happen? Everyone looked at her with different expressions. A young man from the Phoenix clan, who had a water-repelling pearl in his mouth and couldn't speak, raised his hand and pointed at Arbor's mouth. Heavens, as expected of their saintess. After entering the water, you don't need any water barriers to defend yourself. You can easily open your mouth and speak in the water, just like on land. Only then did Arbor realize that those who had the water avoidance pearl in their mouths could not speak. As for those that were able to speak, they were only able to do so through the defensive barrier. Mo Lien, He Chun, Holy Sun Mi Yen, and others rely on their high cultivation so they don't need to open any water barriers after entering the water. However, their speed in the water is obviously not as fast as on land. If it is not necessary, they will not speak. If they want to speak, they will probably still need to use a water barrier to create a small space. Arbor blinked and smoothly swam in front of Long Shangyun and Long Hua. She looked at their mutated fishtails and then swept a glance at the Dragon Clan clansmen with mutated fishtails following behind them. After the Dragon Clan clansmen mutated their fishtails, they could swim freely in the water like fish without any hindrance. Chapter 4340. Isn't this normal? I have the blood of my mother's long family in me. Just like these mermen with mutated fish tails, I can swim freely in the water. Arbor thought to herself. She stomped her feet nonchalantly and returned to her husband's side. Long Qian stared at her deeply. Normal? No, this wasn't normal at all. When they were ordinary people, they would still feel the water pressure when they entered the sea. If they didn't have any protective measures, they wouldn't be able to breathe smoothly in the water. Only after they mutated their fish tails and transformed into mermen could they breathe and speak freely in the water. Arbor, however, entered the water alone. Without any barriers, she could easily run back and forth in the water. She could breathe and speak without any obstruction. How could this be normal? Long Yin took a deep breath and closed his eyes. He turned around and looked at his sister. Both of them nodded. Everyone, follow. Long Qian swayed his body and dove into the deep sea with his sister. While hanging onto her husband's arm, Qiao Mu wriggled her limbs and pulled down the water droplets before grabbing Mo Lien's hand. With a kick of her leg, she pulled Mo Lien along and chased after the Long siblings. Prince Mo was stunned. He suddenly felt his body lighten, as if the water pressure around him had disappeared. A trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. He was already being pulled by his wife. They dove down without any obstruction. The others quickly followed. They used all their strength to dive down and shorten the distance between them and the Long family members in front. Mo Lien only realized how fast Jojo could move in the water after she was pulled by Jojo. She was able to drag a grown man like him so easily and effortlessly. With a casual kick of her legs, she was able to drag him down at least a few dozen feet. They quickly caught up with Long Shangyun, Long Qian, and the others who were leading the way. Still down there? Arbor kicked the water away and turned to look at Long Qian, who had a strange expression on his face. Young Master Long felt that his impression of his cousin was about to be refreshed again. This wasn't abnormal at all. It was extremely abnormal. The little stoic stood gracefully in the water. Her white robes rippled slightly in the water, and her black hair drifted gracefully. Her cold little face, separated by the blue water curtain, appeared to be very red. Although she was in the water, the strange thing was that there was not a trace of water around her. It was not an exaggeration to say that she had completely merged into the water. This attitude was too carefree and unrestrained. It was as if the surrounding seawater was nothing to her. There was no water pressure, and it did not hinder her movements or speech at all. "Why aren't you saying anything?" The little stoic knitted her brows and looked at Long Huan and his sister, who had strange expressions. Ever since the siblings entered the water, they seemed a little strange. When he asked them questions, they didn't open their mouths. He really didn't know what they were thinking. Could it be that he had relapsed and was trying to trick Jojo? Jojo looked at the two of them warily and continued to hold her husband's hand as they dived down. "I'll go first." After saying that, he pulled Mo Lien and kicked off the water. They immediately sank several dozen feet and continued to swim forward. Feng Zhongfei looked back at Feng Zhongqing with a strange expression and asked with his eyes, how could the holy maiden swim so fast? How could Feng Zhongqing know this? He could only reply with a "I don't know" look and pointed at his younger brother's head. Chapter 43-41. At this moment, they were diving deeper and deeper and could already feel the heavy water pressure coming from all directions. Even though they were in the god realm, they had to activate the godly armor or the barrier to protect their heads. Feng Zhongfei understood what his brother meant. He immediately waved his hand to create a godly armor and protective helmet to cover his head, leaving only his eyes exposed. Feng Changqing couldn't help but twitch his mouth. His brother's current appearance was simply he didn't know how ugly he looked swimming in the water with a weird helmet. What's that? Be careful. Be careful. It's coming. The sound of water splashing could be heard. The crowd burst into exclamations. Feng Changqing looked back and hurriedly pushed his brother Feng Zhongfei away. When the two of them suddenly separated, a great white sawtooth shark slid quickly between them. The great white sawtooth shark was about the size of 3 to 5 adults, but it swam very fast in the water. In the blink of an eye, it made its way into the crowd. It opened its mouth and swallowed 2 of Qing Shue's maids. Its teeth were as sharp as knives and axes. In the blink of an eye, the 2 of them were chopped into pieces. Oh my god, is that a mutant zombie shark?
No, it's not mutant.
It's just run. A divine beast. It's a divine beast. Damn. How can a divine beast-level sawtooth shark appear in such a place? In front of a divine beast, even God Realm masters of the same level could only bow their heads and accept their fate, let alone Spirit Realm cultivators. Qing Shue shouted anxiously, "Get out of the way."
Go.
Do you want to die?
Go.
Qing Hongse subconsciously grabbed Qing Shue's hand and pulled her away from the shark's attack range. In the water, Hu Shurchen gestured to the Phoenix clansmen to disperse. Feng Changqing and the others hurriedly spread out and summoned weapons from their consciousness to hold in their hands. The great white sawtooth shark was unstoppable. After biting 3 to 5 people to death, it suddenly turned around in the water and swam quickly toward Qing Shue and her sister, not far away. This great white sawtooth shark is faster than anyone in the water. Everyone, get into formation. Surround it and attack from a distance. Ah! A female attendant who was still commanding the formation watched as the sawtooth white shark rushed over against the wind and waves. She didn't have time to dodge at all and was bitten in half at the waist. Disperse quickly. Qing Shue was so anxious that her eyes turned red. Under his agitation, the water barrier in front of him started to churn rapidly due to his emotions. It even showed signs of breaking. Damn it! She didn't expect that in just a few moves, dozens of her subordinates had already been killed by this great white. This sawtooth white shark had already developed intelligence and knew to pick the soft persimmons to pinch. It always attacked the female attendants below the 7th level of the spirit realm. It completely ignored Hu Shurchen, Holy Sun Mi Yen, and the others. Ma Shurchen and Mi Yen wanted to catch up and restrain him, but their speed was no match for him. He threw out several wood spirits in an attempt to restrain it, but it was as fast as an arrow, and it brushed past him repeatedly. This sawtooth white shark was sly and cunning. It never went near He Chun and the others. When it saw He Chun and Holy Sun Mi Yen, it would run far away. It was truly infuriating. The sawtooth white shark was like a water spirit that toyed with the human world. It had chosen to play with them. With a wave of its tail, it shot in Feng Zhongfei's direction like lightning. Feng Zhongfei's handsome face was a bit stifled. As he flew backwards, he hurriedly mobilized the wood spirits to protect himself. Chapter 43-42. Crack. The sawtooth white shark bit down on his long sword with a ferocious glint in its eyes. It bit a few times, but it couldn't bite his sword in half. However, the sword was like a toothpick, stuck between the rows of sawteeth. Feng Zhongfei held the sword in his hand, and his body swayed back and forth in the water. With his sword held in the mouth by that ferocious sawtooth white shark, his body rose into the air, creating splashes in the water. Zhongfei. Feng Zhongqing and a few other Feng clansmen hastily drew close, and several with spirit restraints clung onto the sawtooth white shark's body. However, the sawtooth white shark broke free of those with spirit restraints in no more than a few seconds. The sawtooth white shark spat out waves of icy spikes, which instantly spread out in a fan-shaped arc. The crowd in front swiftly retreated, and the dozen or so female attendants who couldn't dodge in time were instantly pierced through by the ice spikes. Qing Xuexue's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets as she bellowed, "Quick! Quickly hide behind me!" Holy Sun Mi Yan grasped a sharp blade made of ice and snow and swung it at the sawtooth white shark's head. However, the sawtooth white shark's speed was too fast. With a dodge, it dragged Feng Zhongfei, who was hanging on its long sword, and dashed more than a dozen meters away. Its small, sinister eyes revealed a trace of smugness. It turned its head and opened its mouth, wanting to spit out a water arrow to kill Feng Zhongfei, who was hanging under its teeth. Suddenly, it saw a tiny fish swimming to its side. What was this thing that was so small and so fast? Set up the formation. Arbor blinked and casually tossed out several dozen jade talismans. He set up a confinement talisman formation in the water, which instantly enveloped the sawtooth white shark. The little stoic kicked her legs and rapidly shot in front of the sawtooth white shark like an arrow. She brandished a thunderclap in her hand and directly slashed at the white shark. Thousand Thunder Mirage. Several thousand bolts of lightning interweaved into one and swooped down on the white shark. Even Yuan Shurchen, who had always been calm, couldn't help but twitch his mouth and change his expression. Dodge. With a flick of his finger, wood spirit walls spread out from his body and merged with the water spirit walls that Holy Sun Mi Yan slapped out, forming an enormous defensive shield in the water. 10,000. What the fuck ran through everyone's minds? The 1,000 lightning phantoms that the little girl threw out flashed and rumbled in the sea. The lightning chased after the water and scattered in all directions. It conducted electricity indiscriminately and flowed to the surrounding people. Crackle. Crackle, everyone's forehead twitched. Through the large defensive barrier, they could see countless electric currents flickering and crackling. It was as if there were electric whips directly lashing their bodies. It was inexplicably terrifying. How could they break through it? Long Shi and Long Shangyun used all their strength to barely keep up with the little girl's speed. At this moment, he was also blocked outside the defensive shield set up by the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and Holy Sun Mi Yan. Looking through the water and with defense, he saw the little stoic raise the thunderclap sword and fiercely attack the white sawtooth shark in front of her. In the chaos just now, Feng Zhongfei, who was originally hanging between the teeth of the sawtooth white shark, had completely disappeared. Feng Chongqing couldn't help but sigh in relief. If her little brother, that idiot, was still hanging on the sawtooth white shark's teeth, perhaps he would be the first one to be electrocuted until he was charred on the outside and tender on the inside. The little girl's speed was so fast that it made people click their tongues in wonder. Originally, even the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal and Holy Sun Mi Yan were helpless in front of the white shark's valiant speed. But now, it really was extremely unlucky. Chapter 43:43. This white sawtooth shark truly had 8 lifetimes of bad luck for encountering the little girl. Previously, it could bite many people in half with one bite, but now it was trapped in the little girl's confinement talisman matrix. No matter where it fled to, it simply couldn't escape from her grasp. Even though this fellow forcefully tugged at the confinement talisman matrix to swim in the water, its speed still couldn't compare to the little stoic's. The little stoic was running haphazardly. She was sprinting around in the water, not swimming at all. She caught up to the white shark in a flash and raised her sword. Electricity shot out along the seawater, electrocuting that white sawtooth shark and causing it to roll several times in front of the little stoic. 10,000 horses galloped through everyone's hearts. They felt like there were no other words to describe this indescribable and strange situation. The little stoic was too frightening. This white sawtooth shark that looked so full of itself just now couldn't escape from her grasp at all. No matter how they looked at it, it felt sullen. The venerable peach blossom immortal floated and finally controlled his direction in the water with great difficulty and floated to Mo Lien's side. Glancing askance at him, the venerable peach blossom immortal reached out to lightly touch Mo Lien's arm and asked with his eyes, "Where did you swim to just now?" Mo Lien turned his head and gazed at him strangely. You might not believe it, but Xiao Qiao had already dived several hundred feet down while dragging me. If he hadn't heard the gasps from above, how could Jojo have pulled him back? Why were you so fast? The venerable peach blossom immortal continued to ask while looking at Mo Lien strangely. How would I know? Prince Mo gruffly threw him you know what you mean look. He turned to look to the side and saw that fellow Mi Yen was also floating over while flopping in the water. Mi Yen pointed in the little stoic's direction and then pointed at Long Ji and Long Shangyun. When the venerable peach blossom immortal saw him pointing here and there, he couldn't resist slapping his hand away in annoyance and said, "It's not like you can't speak. Why are you pointing at the sky and the earth?" After saying that, he pinched out a wisp of holy power from his fingertips and set up a water barrier around the three of them. Holy Sun Mi Yen stared blankly for a moment before letting out a long sigh. Phew, it's so uncomfortable. How much longer do we have to dive? Floating in the water all the time was really not a good thing. Let's see what young Lord Long has to say. The venerable peach blossom immortal glanced at Long Shi. The latter's eyes were focused on Arbor. No one knew what he was thinking, but he seemed to be in a trance. The venerable peach blossom immortal could not help raising his eyebrows. Long Shangyun was also a little stunned at this moment. Arbor was playing with the white shark for a long time. The unlucky shark was electrocuted to the brink of death. Xiao Mu flew up and kicked its humongous body towards Mo Lien. Mo Lien, Ji Chen, and Mi Yen hurriedly flung out several bursts of sacred energy, forcibly slicing the white sawtooth shark into several pieces. The little stoic swiftly darted over and grasped a divine beast core that flew out from the sawtooth white shark's body. She nodded in satisfaction. Enveloped in seawater, no one would detect anything unusual even if she summoned the three puppies from the star domain in front of other people. She was practically one with the seawater in all directions. Even if she suddenly disappeared in the sea, Long Shi and the others would probably only think that she was too fast and that her escape speed had far exceeded their visibility in the water. Woof, woof, woof. The three puppies happily pounced in the water. Chapter 43-44. The puppy in the middle opened its mouth and swallowed the crystal core of the white sawtooth shark. It chewed crisply and made crunching sounds. Everyone looked at that expressionless stoic face in horror. Especially Qing Shueshua's guards, who had no ability to resist the attack of the white sawtooth shark just now looked at the little crown princess in front of them as if they were looking at a god. Wasn't it a little too fierce? After Arbor put away the three puppies, she kicked her legs and flew to the stunned Qing Shueshua. How's the damage? Qing Shueshua's small face was a little bitter. She raised her hand and set up a water barrier in front of her. Then she said, "About a dozen people died. I'm sorry for the inconvenience." Arbor raised her hand and patted her shoulder. That white sawtooth shark is equivalent to a master in the 7th level of the divine realm. You are indeed no match for it. Especially in the sea, the difference in strength was too great. It was her fault. She was so happy when she entered the water that she couldn't find the edge. She pulled Mo Lien and dived down so fast that they were all left behind. Qing Shueshua smiled bitterly at her. They were weak. How could they blame others for this kind of thing? Sister Qiao, wait for me. I'll go over and count the number of people. We can leave right away. Arbor nodded. Qing Shueshua tried to stabilize herself and floated to those guards. Not long after, she swam back. There are more than 250 people left. Among them, 20 to 30 have minor injuries. They took hemostatic medicine and blood coagulation pills. It shouldn't be a big problem. It won't affect our progress. Long Qian nodded. In that case, let's continue diving. Arbor pointed to the front. Long Qian, you lead the way. Lian, and I will bring up the rear. After experiencing a divine beast like the white sawtooth shark in the water, the guards around Qing Xue were a little nervous. Hearing Arbor's words, they couldn't help but look at her gratefully. They were the weakest in the team. Not only were they of no help to everyone, but they were also a burden. Let's go. Arbor waved his hand and asked Qing Xue and the others to follow Long Huan. She ran to Mo Lian's side and hugged his arm. Holding his finger, she dragged him to the end of the line. This time, she didn't wander around and obediently followed at the back of the group. She pulled Mo Lian and walked slowly, as if she was strolling in the water. Mo Lian glanced at her from time to time. He suddenly felt that when the little girl dived down at such a slow speed, it was as if she was walking down a flight of stairs.
She even pulled him down step by step.
His Qiao was really an unimaginable little girl. Arbor held Mo Lian's hand as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. He walked for a while and tilted his head to look at him. What is it? You're a little unbelievable. Mo Lian patted her little head in amusement. He was pulled down by Jojo and could feel that there was no water pressure around them. Their breathing was normal, and they could speak freely. He didn't need to activate any water barrier. It was as if there was a vacuum around them. Not a single drop of water could float to them. I think the land of the Forgotten River tribe is the unbelievable one, right? Arbor looked down, and his eyes lit up. Jojo's Lian look. A huge underwater city was rippling in the dense mist. It was like a mirage, dreamy but real. Chapter 43-45. At this time, Mo Lian also saw the dreamlike city underwater, and her eyes couldn't help but flicker. No wonder Long Huan was unwilling to bring the commoners of the Fisherman Island into the River of Forgetfulness. This was indeed very difficult. The River of Forgetfulness was not a place that any ordinary person could dive to. At this time, they saw a city floating under the water, but in reality, they were still quite far away from the city. Not to mention ordinary people, even ordinary spirit realm practitioners would have used up a lot of their spirit power after diving to this extent, and they would need to constantly replenish their spirit pills. Long Huan glanced back at the team behind him from time to time, taking in everyone's expressions. Other than Qing Xue, Qing Hongsa, and the female attendants who had weaker cultivation, Mu Xingchen and the youths of the Phoenix clan were diving down quite easily and did not see any discomfort. But Long Xiangyun secretly glanced at Mu Xingchen and then turned to look at her eldest brother. They knew very well that Mu Xingchen, who also had the bloodline of the Dragon clan, was in a completely different situation from Arbor. At this time, Mu Xingchen had not seen any discomfort in diving into the deep sea, most likely because of his strong cultivation base. And Arbor, she was. The brother and sister looked at each other again, as if they could see a hint of boiling fanaticism in each other's eyes. Changfei, how are you? Feng Chongqing looked strangely at his second brother beside him. Ever since his younger brother had appeared in the team in one piece, he could clearly feel that Changfei seemed to be absent-minded. I'm fine. Feng Changfei was stunned. His mind was still in the realm of all living things growing and peach blossoms filling the sky, and he had not yet recovered. He didn't expect the Holy Maiden to have such a magical thing as the divine domain with her. Could it be that the family's ancestral teachings were not groundless rumors? The ancestral teachings said that in the future, if a woman who could communicate with the phoenix tree without hindrance appeared, she would be the Holy Maiden of the clan and would follow her to death. The old ancestor had such foresight? After all, to be able to follow someone who had a divine domain with her, it was obvious that her future was boundless. Feng Zhongqing reached out and patted him on the shoulder. It was really dangerous just now. Don't be so reckless in the future. Be careful. Feng Zhongfei nodded and secretly turned his head to look at Mo Lian and Arbor, who were at the end of the line. Prince Imo quickly noticed Feng Zhangfei's furtive gaze and unceremoniously glared back. What are you looking at? Don't think that I didn't notice you sneaking glances at me. Shi led the group further down. Along the way, they encountered quite a number of schools of fish, including a small group of mutant zombie fish. Fortunately, after the sawtooth white shark incident, no one dared to let their guard down. They were constantly paying attention to their surroundings. This wave of corpse fish was quickly dealt with. At this moment, when everyone looked down again, they could clearly see the city at the bottom of the sea. The transparent spiral staircase was connected to the corridor of the city below. Everything was like a dream, as if it was rippling in the water. It was as if it was made of transparent ice crystals, sinking to the bottom of the sea and emitting a faint and soft halo. It turned out that the River of Forgetfulness was so beautiful. Everyone's hearts were moved. They followed the spiral staircase down and arrived in front of a large stone wheel carved with mountains and rivers. When the tips of their feet stepped on the soft sand, everyone looked up and saw the blue ribbon-like seawater slowly rippling above their heads. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.